Two enormous blue men are standing in a laboratory, building a machine together, and they are having the same argument they have every single day of their lives. Each one is completely certain he is the original. Each one is completely certain the other is the copy. They are both wrong, and they are both right, and the show never tells you which, because there is no which. And the first time that lands on you properly, it does not feel like a joke anymore. It feels like a trapdoor. Invincible is remembered for its violence, but the thing actually holding the series together is a web of paradoxes, clones who cannot be told apart, a man who attends his own euthanasia, an empire of 37 people ruling a galaxy, a hero named Invincible who loses every fight that matters. Tonight we are going through every one of them, so get comfortable, turn the lights down, we will be here a while, and if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these. Welcome to Rock. Start with those two blue men, because the show starts with them too. The Mauler twins are the very first villains the series puts on screen. The premiere episode, It's About Time, opens at the White House, with the two of them tearing through the lawn and the Secret Service before the Guardians of the Globe and Omni-Man arrive to put them down. On first viewing, they read as a warm-up boss, a matched set of super geniuses with identical faces, identical voices, both performed by Kevin Michael Richardson, who bicker like an old married couple while throwing soldiers around. The bickering is the point, though you do not know it yet, because every argument they have, underneath whatever they are nominally arguing about, is the same argument. Which of us is the original? Which of us is the clone? Here is what the show eventually makes clear about how the Maulers work, and it is established canon, not interpretation. They are clones of each other. Not an original and a copy, as far as either of them can prove, but a pair in which each claims to be the original while insisting the other came out of the tank. Their cloning process keeps the loop running. When one dies, the survivor grows a replacement, and the replacement wakes up with the survivor's memories, including the memory of being the original, because, of course, he remembers being the original. Everyone remembers being the original. That is what memory is. The new Mauler steps out of the vat just as certain as the man who grew him, and the argument resumes. Eternal, unwinnable. Structurally identical to the argument that ended when one of them died. Sit with the mechanics of that for a second, because the show buries a genuinely classical philosophical problem inside a recurring gag. Philosophers have a famous thought experiment about a ship whose planks are replaced one at a time until none of the original wood remains, and the question of whether it is still the same ship. The Maulers are a crueler version, the version where the ship is conscious and insists it was never replaced at all. Memory, which is the only tool any of us has for knowing who we are, is exactly the tool the cloning tank counterfeits. A Mauler cannot settle the question by introspection, because introspection is the crime scene. Whatever he finds in there, the tank put it there, or it was there all along, and there is no third instrument to check with. The show plays this for comedy, and the comedy is doing something dark, because what you are laughing at is two beings locked out of the answer to the most basic question a mind can ask about itself. And the series, very quietly, keeps raising the stakes on the joke. In the third episode of Season 1, the Maulers escape from their Global Defense Agency prison with outside help, and the escape requires one of them to stay behind, which is to say, the escape requires one of them to die for the other, which is to say, a being who believes he is the original sacrifices himself so that a being he believes is his copy can go free and grow a new copy who will believe he was the original. Run that sentence through your head again slowly. The sacrifice is real, the loyalty is real, and the metaphysics underneath it is a hall of mirrors. Later, restored and rebuilt as always, they take a job growing a new body for a hidden client, and the work they do in that lab detonates the show's second great clone paradox, which we will get to in a moment. The Maulers are not just a paradox themselves. They are the show's paradox factory, the tank from which its hardest questions literally get poured. What makes them linger, though, is the ending the show eventually gives them, because it is not an ending the paradox deserves, and I think that is deliberate. In Season 3, Episode 3, You Want a Real Costume, Right? The Maulers break into a missile silo planning to fire an electromagnetic weapon that would wreck the world's communications, and they are killed. Not defeated, killed, and not by a hero exactly, but by Oliver, Mark's little brother. A child who has not yet learned why you are not supposed to do that, and who calmly explains afterward that they were bad people and would only have escaped again. He is not wrong about that. They always escaped. They always came back. That was the joke, and the joke required it. And then a child treats the revolving door as a problem with a solution, and the door stops revolving, and the argument that ran for 3 seasons just stops mid-sentence, permanently, with no one ever having won it. Somewhere in the logic of that ending is the show's whole attitude toward its own paradoxes. They do not get resolved, they get interrupted. Because here's the thing about the Maulers that the casual viewer never has to confront. There is a real philosophical position, a respectable one, under which neither of those men was ever a copy, under which both were fully, equally the original. Because identity just is psychological continuity, and both of them had it. And there is another respectable position under which both of them were copies of a man long dead, 2 echoes arguing over which echo is the voice. The show refuses to pick. The show kills them with the question open, and the silo explosion that ends them is in its way. The most honest answer the series ever gives to any of its riddles. The universe does not owe a paradox a resolution. It only owes it an ending. Hold on to the Mauler's tank, though. Keep the smell of that lab in your mind. Because the strangest thing those two ever built was not a weapon and was not a clone of themselves. It was a body for somebody else. A small, polite, brilliant somebody who had been piloting a machine from inside a hidden tank of his own, and what he did with that new body is the single most layered identity paradox this franchise has ever constructed. The Maulers argued about which of them was real. The man they worked for solved the problem a different way. He decided the question of who he was had an engineering solution, and he was wrong in a way the show is still unpacking seasons later. For most of Season 1, Robot is the most dependable presence in the show. The drone with the soothing synthesized voice, performed by Zachary Quinto, leader of the teen team, then architect of the new Guardians of the Globe. The calm gray machine that catches teammates when they fall. The audience files him under artificial intelligence and moves on. Then the show opens the box. Robot is not a robot. The drone is a remote, and the operator is Rudy Connors, a small, deformed, brilliant man floating in a life support tank in a hidden room, a person whose body cannot survive open air, watching his own heroism through cameras, applauded by a world that has never seen him. The machine was never the costume of a mind, it was the prosthetic of a prisoner, and Rudy, being Rudy, treats his imprisonment as an engineering problem. This is where the Maulers come back in. The job he hires them for, the body they are growing in that vat, is his way out, a new body, young, healthy, fully human in function. But he does not grow a copy of himself. He grows it from a DNA sample secretly taken from his teammate, Rexplode. Think about the decision buried in that choice. Rudy could presumably have cloned his own genome, his own face, his own deformity-corrected self. He chose instead to be someone else, to walk out of the tank wearing a stranger's youth, and not even a stranger. A friend, a teammate, a specific known man whose genetic face he would now share like a borrowed coat. The show externalizes the eeriness through casting. The new body does not speak with Quinto's synthetic calm. It speaks with a voice that audibly echoes Jason Mantzoukas' Rex, performed by Ross Marquand doing a deliberate near impression, so that every line out of the new Rudy arrives wrapped in someone else's sound. But the show is not done, because the transfer itself contains the real paradox, and the series stages it with a coldness that still startles me. The new body wakes with Rudy's mind copied into it. The original Rudy, the small man in the tank, is still there, still alive, still Rudy by every test that matters. There are, for a few minutes, 2 of him, the one who escaped and the one who remains, and the escape is only complete if the remainder ends. In the 7th episode of Season 1, the new Rudy euthanizes his progenitor, reluctantly, gently, the strong young hands ending the frail original on his own instructions. The show frames it as mercy, as plan, as consent. Now apply the Mauler test. If identity is continuity of memory, the man in the tank did not transfer anywhere. He was copied, and then he was killed, and the thing walking around in Rex's spare body is a new person who remembers being him. Under that reading, Rudy Connors did not escape his prison. He hired the Maulers to build his replacement, and then his replacement attended his deathbed. Under the other reading, the kinder one, a mind moved house and demolished the condemned building behind it. The show, exactly as it did with the Maulers, declines to tell you which story you watched. What it does instead is let the consequences accumulate, season after season, like interest on an unpaid question. The new Rudy must explain to the Guardians what he is. And the explanation lands as a betrayal, even though every step of it was, in his accounting, rational. He pursues a relationship with Monster Girl, and we will get to the heartbreaking geometry of that pairing later in the hour, but notice even here the shape of it. A man in a body that is not his loving a woman whose body is aging in the wrong direction. And then Season 3 closes the loop with a detail so quiet you can miss what it is doing. Rexplode dies a hero's death in the Invincible War, holding the line detonating his own skeleton to save his teammates. At the funeral, Rudy announces that he is taking the name Rex to honor him. Sit with that. The man who walks out of that funeral has Rex's genome, Rex's approximate voice. And now Rex's name, and inside all three runs the copied consciousness of a tank-bound genius whose original body was euthanized by this very copy. 4 identities deep. A name borrowed from the dead, worn by a body borrowed from the dead man's blood, animated by a mind that may itself be a duplicate of a man it agreed to kill. There is no character in modern animation, maybe in modern television, with a stranger answer to the question, "Who are you?" And the show treats him, sincerely, as one of its heroes. Read this way: The New Rex is the series' standing argument that identity is not a fact you have, but a story you maintain, and that the maintenance can be an act of love. Read the other way: He is a walking graveyard with excellent manners. Both readings fit every frame. And while Rudy was solving his prison with a vat, the organization he worked beside was solving death itself with a filing system. Which brings us to the most overlooked paradox in the entire series, the one wearing a suit and an earpiece, standing politely behind Cecil Stedman. Donald Ferguson is the Global Defense Agency's perfect lieutenant, the calm administrator of the world's emergencies. In the 7th episode of Season 1, when Omni-Man's cover finally tears open, Donald dies. He is killed in the carnage Nolan unleashes. On screen, unambiguously, several agents dying around him. And then, episodes later, there he is again, suit pressed, earpiece in. Manner unchanged, and the show lets him stand there unremarked just long enough for the audience to doubt its own memory, which is, you will notice, becoming a theme tonight. The explanation arrives in Season 2, and it is worse than a retcon and better than one. Donald's brain was transferred into a robotic endoskeleton built in his image. The replacement was so seamless that Donald himself did not know. The man supervising the world's secrets was himself a secret, kept from himself. Season 2 then walks him through the discovery, and it is one of the show's most quietly devastating arcs. A burn that does not hurt, a hand that is not flesh under the skin, records that do not add up, and then the records that do, the ones establishing that this has happened before, that he has died in the line of duty not once, but many times, and been rebuilt, and had the rebuilding hidden from him. A stack of deaths deep enough that the show lets the number stay vague, because vagueness is scarier. Every version of Donald woke up certain he was the original, certain in exactly the way the Maulers are certain, and every version was wrong in exactly the way that cannot be felt from inside. The difference is that the Maulers chose their loop. Donald's loop was chosen for him by an employer who needed his competence more than his consent, and who reasoned in Cecil's bottomless pragmatism. That grief was an inefficiency, and continuity of staffing was a kindness. The paradox Donald is left holding is the one the show hands so many of its characters, but his version has the sharpest edges, because he has to keep working alongside the machine that prints him. Is he a man with an unusual medical history, or a series of men, each inheriting a dead colleague's life the way the new Rex inherited a name? When he chooses, eventually, to keep serving, to keep being Donald, knowing what the word now means, the show frames it as quiet heroism, and I think it earns the framing. But notice what his choice actually is. It is the Mauler argument. Surrendered, Donald stops asking which of him is real, because the question has no operational meaning and starts asking only what Donald would do. As if Donald were a role, a post to be staffed, a relay race run by men who never get to meet. Somewhere in that surrender is either the death of the self or its maturest possible form, and the show, as always, will not say which. It just keeps him in frame, behind Cecil, steady, polite, the most replaceable, irreplaceable man on Earth. And Donald is only the administrative version of the problem. The Guardians roster contains the mythological version, a man for whom death has never once been the end. And his story is where the show's resurrection paradoxes stop being clever and start being sad. The Immortal has been alive for thousands of years. The show establishes his background with a straight face that makes it funnier and sadder at once. An ancient warrior, changed by something he never asked for, who has spent millennia outliving everyone and everything, fighting in the Crusades, leading the original Guardians of the Globe, and, in the franchise's single most gleefully strange piece of canon, spending one of his many hidden lifetimes as Abraham Lincoln. That detail is not a fan theory, it is established background. And the show drops it the way you would mention an old job. He cannot die in any way that lasts. Decapitation is the one true exit. And even that, the series demonstrates, has workarounds when the wrong people get hold of his body. Now watch what the show actually does with him, because a lesser series would use a deathless man as a power fantasy, and this one uses him as a slow-motion tragedy about the value of endings. In the first season, the Immortal is murdered by Omni-Man along with the rest of the original Guardians. The Mauler twins then steal his corpse and resurrect him, intending to use him as an enthralled weapon, and the resurrection works in the way resurrections in this show always work, which is to say, wrongly. He comes back howling, beyond their control, with one priority, Nolan, and he flies off to avenge his team and is killed by Omni-Man a second time, on a live broadcast in front of the world. 2 deaths in 1 season, neither of which takes. The Global Defense Agency recovers him, and recovery is routine. For everyone else in the cast, death is the wall. For him, it is a door that keeps being rude enough to open. Here is the paradox the show builds out of that, and Season 3 states it almost explicitly. A man who cannot die cannot lose anything except everything else. His losses are never his own life, they are everyone else's. Wives, friends, teams, countries, centuries of accumulated love amputated on schedule while he continues. Death is what makes time precious, and he has been locked out of the economy. So when Season 3's 4th episode, You Are My Hero, pulls its trick, the trick lands like a verdict. 2 time-traveling thieves, Fightmaster and Dropkick, kidnap Mark and drag him into a far future where Earth groans under a tyrant king, and the king is the Immortal, driven mad by his own endlessness. Every anchor long dead, and he has arranged the kidnapping himself across time for one purpose. He needs Invincible to kill him. He blames Mark for leaving, demands a battle to the death, and the battle is real, and Mark, reluctantly, finally, gives the oldest living thing in the show the only gift it cannot give itself. Then Mark is returned to the present, where the Immortal is alive, sane, leading the Guardians, unaware that his friend has already attended his deathbed at the other end of history. Think about the shape the show has drawn there. Donald cannot stop dying. The Immortal cannot start. Both of them are trapped on opposite sides of the same wall, and the series gives them the same dramatic question, which is whether a life without a guaranteed ending can hold any meaning at all. The future episode answers it in the bleakest available register, and then the present-day episodes spend the rest of the season quietly arguing back. Because the Immortal in the show's present is trying again anyway. He falls in love again. He plans a family again. He does the one thing his entire future self stands as a warning against. He invests in mortals, knowing exactly what compound interest on grief looks like at his scale. Read this way, the Immortal is the show's bravest character, not because he fights, everyone fights, but because he keeps choosing to love on a timeline where every love is a scheduled amputation. And the woman he chooses makes the geometry perfect, because she is the one person on the roster whose relationship with death is almost as broken as his. Her name is Kate Cha, and the show calls her Duplicate, and her power sounds like a convenience until you do the arithmetic. She self-replicates. Every duplicate is numbered, and the canon is precise about the architecture. The prime Kate is number 0, and a telepathic link binds the network together, which means, and the show says this plainly, that what the duplicates feel, she feels. Now run the battlefield math. Kate's fighting style is mass, dozens of bodies thrown at the problem. Duplicates die constantly, casually, in every major engagement, shot, crushed, torn, and the team barely reacts. Because Kate is fine, Kate is always fine, there are more Kates where those came from. Except the show has already told you the price in its own quiet technical language. She feels it. Every one. The franchise's most disposable hero is, by the show's own rules, its most frequently killed character. A woman who has experienced her own death more times than anyone could count. Distributed across a network that always has one node left to do the remembering. So when Season 2 appears to kill her for real, during the catastrophic mission against the Lizard League, every visible duplicate destroyed, the show stages something it has never staged before, the team grieving Kate as a person rather than refilling her as a resource. The Immortal breaks. The loss is played completely straight for episodes. And then the season finale opens the door again. She is alive. One body had been held back, hidden, unannounced, and the reveal that should feel like a cheat lands instead as a thesis, because of who she explains herself to. She tells the Immortal, the deathless man learns that the woman he mourned kept a spare life in reserve. The way he keeps all of his, involuntarily, forever, the two of them are the same paradox wearing different mechanics, beings for whom dying is survivable and therefore unshareable, and the show marries them to each other because no one else on Earth speaks the language. By season 3, they are planning a family. The unkillable man and the woman who is her own crowd. And somewhere in that household arithmetic, the question of what one life even counts as has quietly given up on having an answer. There is one more resident of this wing of the show, and she completes the set by breaking it. Monster Girl ages backward. The canon is specific and merciless, a cursed young woman whose transformations into her ogre form each shave time off her body, so that she begins the series chronologically 24 years old and physically 12. Every use of her power is a withdrawal from her own childhood, paid in reverse. The immortal has too much time, Kate has too many lives, and Amanda has a body spending its way backward toward infancy. A hero whose every act of heroism makes her less able to be treated as the adult she is. Season 3 gives her arc its cruelest twist of dignity. Rudy, the man in the cloned body, working obsessively to repair the woman whose body will not hold still. The show's two most paradoxical physical existences trying to engineer each other a future. The argument here, and I will flag it as the essay's reading, is that this entire cluster of characters exists so the series can triangulate one idea from every direction, that a self is not a body, not a count of lives, not a position on a timeline, but something that persists in spite of all three, and that nobody in the show can prove it. Which is the perfect note to leave Earth on. Because the grandest paradox in this series is not a person at all. It is an empire, the most feared force in the known universe, the conquerors whose name makes planets surrender before the fleet arrives. And the entire terrifying institution is, by its own most closely guarded numbers, almost nobody. For 2 full seasons, the Viltrum Empire is presented as the nightmare at the edge of every map. Nolan's reveal in the Season 1 finale frames Earth as one more entry in an endless ledger of conquered worlds. The coalition of planets exists, we are told, specifically because entire civilizations pooled their survival around resisting these people. Individual Viltrumites, Anissa, Lucan, the Executioners, arrive on Earth and handle the planet's strongest defenders like furniture. Everything the show lets you see says the same thing. This is an empire of gods, and it is everywhere, and it is coming. And then Season 3, Episode 4, You Were My Hero, detonates the premise in a single line of dialogue, delivered not as a twist but as a confession, in a prison cell. Nolan, awaiting execution by his own people, tells Alan the thing the Empire kills to keep hidden. The Viltrum Empire now consists of fewer than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites. Fewer than 50. The force projecting dominion over a galaxy, the name that makes star systems pre-surrender, is a population that would not fill a school bus. A plague, the Scourge virus, tore through the species in the backstory, and the empire that survived it is a skeleton crew wearing the reputation of a horde. By the 4th season finale, the accounting is even more precise, and even more absurd, 37 of them left. Stated plainly, 37 individuals as the entire remaining roster of the most feared civilization in existence. Sit with the paradox in its cleanest form. The Viltrum Empire is simultaneously the strongest force in the universe and one bad afternoon from extinction. Both of those facts are canon. Each individual Viltrumite is functionally an army, which is the only reason the arithmetic works at all, but the arithmetic is still insane. An imperial bureaucracy of conquest, occupation officers assigned to planets, timetables for assimilation, all of it administered by a population smaller than a wedding party. The Empire's actual load-bearing structure is not strength, it is secrecy about scarcity. Its one strategic imperative, above any battle, is that no one ever learns how few of them there are, because the moment the universe does the math, 10,000 worlds attack at once, and arithmetic finishes what the virus started. The most powerful beings alive are, in the show's deepest irony, in hiding. Power so total, it cannot survive being counted. And the scarcity explains everything the show seeded earlier, retroactively, beautifully. It explains why Earth matters at all, one backwater planet. Because the Empire's survival plan is breeding stock, human compatibility, Mark himself as proof of concept. It explains the Empire's bizarre patience with its defectors, why Nolan. A traitor by every imperial law is imprisoned rather than instantly destroyed, why Mark keeps receiving recruitment speeches instead of execution squads. You do not spend Viltrumites when there are 37 of them. Every single one is, demographically, a measurable percentage of the species. The show never says that sentence out loud, but it is the quiet logic under every Viltrumite scene from Season 2 onward. An empire conducting a war it cannot afford to fight, with soldiers it cannot afford to lose, terrifying precisely because it is desperate. Now fold in the second layer, because the breeding mandate turns the scarcity paradox into a self-destruction machine. The Empire's plan for survival is hybridization, Viltrumite genes carried forward through other species. Nolan's mission on Earth was, in the long run, exactly that. And look at what the plan produces. It produces Mark Grayson, who becomes the single greatest obstacle the Empire has ever faced. It produces Oliver, the Empire's survival strategy manufactures with industrial reliability. The agents of its own undoing, children with Viltrumite power and un-Viltrumite loyalties, raised among the conquered, loving the conquered. The institution can only continue by creating beings who will end it. There is a name for that shape in every tragedy ever written, and the show knows it, and Season 4's finale weaponizes it, Thrag standing in front of Mark, offering the deal that is also a surrender and also a slow invasion. The Empire hiding inside humanity itself, betting its future on the exact process that keeps producing its enemies. And above all of it stands the show's most elegant institutional paradox, the Empire's founding wound, which Season 4 finally dramatizes in flashback. Thetis, the founder and leader of the Coalition of Planets, the galaxy's great resistance, the Empire's most dangerous enemy, is himself a Viltrumite. The 7th episode of Season 4 shows it plainly, thousands of years back. Thetis assassinating Emperor Argal, the act sitting at the root of the entire galactic order. The resistance against Viltrum was founded by Viltrum. The Empire's oldest enemy is its own blood, which means the war that has consumed the known universe is, at its origin point, a family argument, the same shape as the Grayson kitchen table scaled up to galaxies. And the post-credits scene of the Season 4 finale completes the thought with the coldest image the franchise has produced. The revelation that Thetis, the Great Liberator, left behind a perfected scourge virus and a final position stated without apology that the universe will never be safe until every Viltrumite is dead. The Pacifist Coalition's founder, planning the extinction of his own species, including, necessarily, the hybrid children, including Mark, including Oliver. The cure for Empire turns out to be genocide, proposed by the Empire's own most moral son. Every camp in this war is now run by Viltrumites trying to delete Viltrumites. The snake is not eating its tail, it is aiming a syringe at it. The argument here, and I will mark it as the essay's reading, is that the Viltrum Empire is the show's whole thesis rendered as a civilization. Strength that cannot admit weakness becomes a lie that must be defended with more strength. A father who cannot admit love becomes an empire that cannot admit it is dying. The household and the empire run on the same machinery of performed invincibility, and the series has spent 4 seasons letting both machines shake themselves apart. Nothing about that reading is stated in dialogue, all of it is load-bearing in every episode. But the Empire's enemies are not exempt from the machinery, and the Coalition's own ranks contain a paradox the show built in a laboratory on purpose and named Alan. Alan the alien enters the series as a joke. A genial orange giant who shows up in the 2nd episode to test Earth's defenses for the Coalition of Planets gets into a friendly brawl with Mark and discovers mid-conversation that he has been attacking the wrong planet, a clerical error involving a world called Urath. Seth Rogen voices him like a coworker you would actually miss. And for a season, he functions as comic relief from a galaxy away. Then the show unpacks him, and the unpacking is one long paradox. Alan's homeworld, Unopa, was attacked by the Viltrumites, and his people's response was to engineer a champion, to deliberately breed and design a being who could stand against them. Alan is not a warrior who volunteered. He is a project that was born. His entire existence is an answer to an atrocity that predates him, a purpose installed before any self existed to consent to it. And the engineering carries a property that turns him into a walking contradiction of the empire he opposes. Alan grows from his injuries. Where a Viltrumite is born at the summit and stays there, Alan's design rewards catastrophe, each near-death rebuilding him stronger, which the 3rd season makes explicit when his Viltrumite captors begin testing him specifically to understand the source of his newfound strength after their own beating nearly killed him. Think about the economy of that. The Empire's power is static and hoarded, 37 units of it, unreplaceable, hidden. Alan's power is compound interest on suffering. They are opposite answers to the same question, and the show stages the contrast inside a Viltrumite prison, where Alan and Nolan, the engineered weapon and the defected god, share a cell and become, against every line on the org chart, friends. The Coalition built a person to be a weapon, and the person keeps insisting on being a person, befriending the enemy, falling in love, hesitating where the design says strike. By the 4th season, with Thetis gone, the post-credit scene hands Alan the Coalition itself, along with the genocide virus and the dead founder's final instruction. The being engineered as a weapon is now the conscience deciding whether to fire the largest weapon ever made at the species that made him necessary. His makers wanted a sword. They accidentally built the person who has to decide what the sword is for. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the show has been running the same experiment in a crib. Oliver Grayson is the strangest child in the series and the most precise paradox in it. He is Nolan's son by Andressa, a Thraxan, born during Nolan's exile, which makes him Mark's half-brother and the Empire's second proof that hybridization works. But the Thraxan half of his inheritance comes from a species whose entire lifespan runs about 9 months, biology built for a mayfly people, and the collision of that with Viltrumite longevity produces a childhood in fast forward. Oliver grows from infant to articulate child at a speed the show treats matter-of-factly, and the audience never quite stops finding eerie. And the canon is explicit that his father's genes have drastically slowed his Thraxan aging, meaning the acceleration is the prologue, not the destiny. He is a person sprinting through the only years humans consider formative, on his way to a lifespan measured in millennia. Childhood, the thing that makes us, is the thing his body is skipping. And the show asks with total seriousness what that does to a conscience. Oliver is raised with more love than almost any child in the series. Debbie raising her husband's son by another world, which is its own quiet miracle of the show, April the nanny, Mark the doting brother. The nurture argument has everything going for it. And yet it is Oliver who, in Season 3, kills the Mauler twins without hesitation and without aftermath, and explains himself with a child's flat clarity. They were bad people. They would have escaped. This saves everyone trouble. The fandom argued for months about whether he was wrong. The paradox is not whether he was wrong. The paradox is that the boy who skipped childhood also skipped the long, slow apprenticeship in doubt that childhood is for, the decade of scraped knees and rules and consequences in which humans learn that their certainty is usually wrong. Oliver reasons like an adult because his mind grew at the speed of his body. But doubt is not a function of intelligence. It is a function of time served. And he has served none. He is the show's test of whether morality can be installed quickly, and the early returns, a hero who kills easily and sleeps fine, are the scariest data the series has produced. When Mark, at the end of Season 3, tells Oliver he was right, that he will kill to protect the family too, the show completes the loop. The child did not rise to the adult's morality. The adult descended to the child's. Put Alan and Oliver side by side and the pairing stops being coincidence. Both are manufactured answers to the Viltrumite problem. One engineered in a lab, one bred in an empire's survival plan. Both were built to be weapons by someone else's logic before they could choose anything. And both keep generating the same question from opposite directions. Whether a purpose you were given can ever become a self you chose. Alan, the deliberate weapon, keeps choosing gentleness. Oliver, the accidental one, keeps choosing efficiency. The argument here, flagged as the essay's reading, is that the show is using its two artificial children to take apart the oldest excuse in its universe, the Viltrumite creed that nature is destiny. Nothing in this series behaves according to what it was made for. The weapons grow consciences, the conquerors grow families, the Empire's genetics keep producing its gravediggers. Design, in Invincible, is just the first draft of a person, and every person in it is busy rewriting. Which brings us to the machinery the show uses to do its rewriting. The strange clocks it keeps running in the background of the universe. Because once you start looking for them, you realize this series is full of time running at the wrong speed, and almost every tragedy in it is, underneath everything else, a scheduling problem. The first clock the show breaks belongs to the Flaxans, and it breaks in the second episode of the series. So early that most viewers file the idea away as a one-off gag and never notice it become the show's master theme. The Flaxans are interdimensional invaders, a warrior race that pours out of portals into the middle of a city, and the teen team's first major engagement with them ends in the strangest way a battle can end. The invaders start aging rapidly, armor sagging on withering bodies, soldiers collapsing into their own lifespans, a retreat sounded not by defeat, but by decay. Robot works out the mechanism, and the show states it cleanly. The Flaxen's home dimension runs on a different clock, time passing there far faster than it does on Earth. Minutes here are years there. An invasion that lasts a quarter of an hour on our side costs the invaders a generation. Now, follow what the show does with the gag, because the escalation is where the paradox sharpens into something almost mythological. The Flaxens return, and this time they have engineered countermeasures, devices to hold their bodies stable against Earth's slow time. And they are led by a commander the show names Slash, whose face carries a scar from the first invasion. Except, run the clocks. For Earth, the previous invasion was weeks ago. For Slash, it was a lifetime. He has aged decades between appearances, nursed the grudge across what is for him an entire era, raised the project of revenge into his civilization's defining work. The show is quietly telling you that somewhere in a fast-running dimension, Earth is not an enemy. Earth is a myth, a place their great-grandparents touched for 15 minutes. A legend of a world where time barely moves and the people are functionally eternal, and entire Flaxen lifetimes have been spent preparing to strike at it again. From our side, a recurring villain. From their side, a holy war against the land of the deathless, prosecuted across generations. And then Omni-Man ends it, and the ending inverts everything. Nolan follows the final invasion back through the portal, into their fast dimension, and devastates their civilization, and when he steps back through to Earth, the show lands its quietest, cruelest joke about time. He has been gone for months of their time. Here, barely anything. The Conqueror walks out of an afternoon's work that was, on the other side of the door, a long campaign of ruin. The Flaxen paradox, read this way, is the entire Viltrumite condition in miniature. Because what is Nolan on Earth if not a Flaxen in reverse, a being from the slow aristocracy of time? Descending into the quick little lives below, where everyone he might love will wither in what is, for him, an afternoon. The show built a whole alien species just to let you feel, for one episode, what humans look like from a Viltrumite's clock. Because that is the actual wound at the center of this series, and it is spoken aloud in the Season 1 finale in the middle of the worst fight the show ever staged. Nolan, trying to break his son into joining the Empire, reaches past the violence for the argument he believes is unanswerable, and it is an argument about time. Everyone Mark loves will be gone in what is, to a Viltrumite, no time at all. His mother, his friends, the entire human world, a rounding error in a lifespan measured in millennia. What will Mark have left, his father demands, after the centuries have taken everyone? And Mark, broken, bleeding, gives the answer that ends the fight without winning it, that he would still have his father. The Empire's whole philosophy is in Nolan's question, and the show's whole philosophy is in Mark's answer. And notice that neither of them disputes the clock. The math is real. Debbie will be gone in a blink. The question the series asks, in every season, in every paradox we have visited tonight, is whether the blink is worth pricing in, and Nolan's entire arc, the abandonment, Thraxa, the prison. The tears he cannot explain is one long failure to keep believing his own answer. Thraxa is where the show runs the experiment at civilizational scale, and it is the most tender paradox in the entire series. The Thraxens, the insectoid people Nolan flees to after abandoning Earth, live about 9 months. The canon is matter of fact about it: accelerated aging. Whole lives compressed into the span of a school year, an entire civilization of mayflies. And the show, pointedly, does not present them as tragic. Thraxa works. It has art, architecture, kindness, joy, a culture handed across generations that turn over like seasons. They make Nolan their leader, the eternal being parked in a kingdom of the momentary. And it is there, of all places, that the man who called his wife a pet starts to thaw, because Thraxa removes the lie he had been using as armor. You cannot pretend mortality is beneath your attention when everyone around you lives 9 months and refuses to be miserable about it. The Thraxens love at full strength on a deadline a Viltrumite would consider a single breath, and their 9 months embarrass his 2,000 years. Because they are doing the thing he could not, spending the time instead of hoarding it. Read this way: Oliver, the child of Viltrum and Thraxa, is not just a hybrid of 2 species. He is a hybrid of the 2 opposite answers to time, eternity and the mayfly, fused into one small body that grew up in months and may live for millennia. The show's strangest child is a walking peace treaty between the only 2 clocks in the universe that matter. There is one more timepiece in the drawer, and the show plays it for the purest paradox of the lot. Fightmaster and Dropkick, the time-traveling thieves from the deep future who appear in Season 3, are a matched pair of running jokes with one devastating function. They make the future a place that can be burgled, and in doing so, they smuggle in the classic problem every time travel story eventually faces. They abduct Mark to kill their tyrant king at the end of history, and Mark does it. And then he comes home, to a present where the man he killed is alive and good and has no idea. So what exactly is that future now? A fate, a possibility, a memory of a place that may never get to exist, carried by the one man who has to attend barbecues with its younger, innocent ghost. The show never explains its time travel rules, and I think the silence is the point. Mark is not given knowledge he can use. He is given grief he cannot file. He knows what his friend is capable of becoming, the way Cecil knows what Mark is capable of becoming, the way the audience knows what Nolan was all along, and none of that knowledge changes a single decision anyone makes in the present. The future is the show's last unbeatable clock, visible, inevitable maybe, and utterly unspendable. So the series keeps a drawer of broken clocks, dimensions running hot, lifespans running backward, futures filed as memories, and every one of them is pointed at the same nerve, the unbearable difference between how long we last and how much we love. But clocks only break time in one direction at a time. The show has a machine that breaks everything at once, every choice, every self, every world. A machine that takes the question "who are you?" and multiplies it by infinity. It is a pair of green portals, and the man who opens them used to be the smartest person alive, right up until the day he became too many people to be anyone at all. Season 2 opens somewhere it has no business opening. A ruined Earth, rubble where cities were, and the Graysons, father and son, side by side, having won. This is the premiere episode, a lesson for your next life, and it takes a long, cruel moment to reveal its trick, that we are not watching a flash forward or a nightmare, we are watching another universe, one of the many where Mark said yes to his father in that Chicago wasteland, where the beating ended in agreement instead of abandonment, and the two of them broke the world together. And picking through the rubble of that world is a man in goggles, a scientist, gathering something no one else in any universe is gathering. Versions of himself. Angstrom Levy is the show's most intellectually constructed villain, and his paradox is built with watchmaker precision. So let me lay the pieces out in order. His power is portals, doorways between the infinite parallel universes, which makes him, functionally, the only man who can browse the full catalog of what existence offers. And what he learns from browsing is the thing that breaks the show open. In nearly every universe, Mark Grayson is a monster. The variant Marks sided with their fathers, conquered their Earths, killed their billions. Our Mark, the one we follow, is the anomaly, the rare draw, the version that came out kind. Angstrom, meanwhile, is the opposite anomaly in his own catalog, a man who, in this universe, is benevolent, brilliant, and convinced he can fix the world, while elsewhere his variants range across every shade of compromise. The hero of our show is the exception to his own multiverse. So is its villain. Hold that symmetry. The show is about to weaponize it. Because Angstrom's plan, the thing he is doing in that ruined world in the opening scene, is the most hubristic self-improvement project ever depicted in animation. He has gathered dozens of his own variants and built a machine, with the help of the Mahler twins, who else, to merge the knowledge of every alternate Angstrom into his single skull. All the science every version of him ever learned, all the history of every timeline. One mind holding the complete map. He believes the merged knowledge will let him solve his world's problems. Hunger, war, energy, everything. It is altruism at the scale of madness, and the show lets it be genuinely altruistic, which is what makes the next part land. The process is interrupted, catastrophically, mid-merge, in the chaos of Mark's battle with the Maulers, and Angstrom comes out the other side transformed in both directions at once. His brain, swollen and mutated, now holds the memories of thousands of versions of himself, including endless versions whose lives were destroyed by their universe's Invincible, versions whose families Mark's variants murdered, versions who died screaming at the hands of the face Angstrom now cannot stop seeing, and the machinery of judgment that might have sorted those memories. The calm scientific mind that knew our Mark was the exception, that machinery is exactly what the accident broke. Now say his paradox plainly, because it is one of the most elegant the show has ever built. Angstrom Levy made himself the most knowledgeable being in the multiverse and lost the ability to know anything. He has more true facts about Mark Grayson than any entity alive. Thousands of universes of evidence, and the evidence is all real, the atrocities all happened, the grieving all justified, and the conclusion he draws from it is wrong. In this universe, about this Mark, he is not lying. He is not even mistaken in his data. He is mistaken in his indexing, a man whose memories outnumber his self, who can no longer reliably tell which life he actually lived, which murdered family was actually his. The show gives him a small, devastating supporting detail in the Season 2 finale, a child variant, Angstrom Jr., the son of an alternate Angstrom, orphaned when that universe's Invincible killed his father. The grief is real somewhere. It is always real somewhere. That is the trap of infinite worlds. Every grievance is true in one of them. And a broken indexer can wage a perfectly sincere war over a wrong he never personally suffered. Read this way. Angstrom is the show's portrait of what the internet age does to a mind, drowning in true stories that happen to other versions of everyone, unable to feel the difference between elsewhere and here. I will flag that as interpretation. The text just gives you the man, the swollen skull, and the vendetta that is simultaneously completely justified and completely misaddressed. The Season 2 finale, I Thought You Were Stronger, caches the paradox in the cruelest currency available. Angstrom attacks Mark through the multiverse itself, hurling him from world to world through the portals, and finally threatens the thing our Mark actually is, which is a son and a brother, the family in the kitchen. And Mark, the exception, the kind one, the variant who said no, beats Angstrom Levy to death with his bare hands. Or believes he does. The show holds nothing back in that sequence. It is long and ugly, and Mark screams through all of it. And when it is over, he is alone in a barren dimension with a body, having just become, for one sustained minute, indistinguishable from every variant of himself he was supposed to disprove. The episode title is Angstrom's line, his bewildered dying judgment that he thought Mark was stronger, and the title is a paradox in 8 words. Stronger would have meant not killing him. Stronger would have meant killing him before the war he launched cost what it later costs. Both readings are live. Neither lets Mark sleep, and the show spends the entire 3rd season inside that insomnia. Because Angstrom is not dead. He is recovered, healed, and remade by the technicians, and his answer to having been nearly beaten to death by the exception is to stop arguing with the data and start curating it. The Invincible War, the 7th episode of Season 3, is the paradox industrialized. Angstrom returns with a strike force of Invincibles, variant Marks harvested from the catalog of monstrous universes, and turns them loose on our Earth simultaneously, around the world, wearing our Mark's face. Cities burn under the image of their own protector. The plan's cruelty is structural, not incidental. He is not just attacking the planet, he is attacking the exception itself, forcing this universe to experience every other universe's Mark, drowning the one world where the name Invincible meant something good under the weight of all the worlds where it did not. The hero's losses are devastating, and we have stood at Rex's grave already tonight. But notice the 2 paradoxes the war leaves behind. The variants, defeated, turn on Angstrom, and his response is to strand them on a desolate world. The man who hates Invincible becoming the keeper of a private prison of Invincibles, curator of the monsters he recruited, warden of his own evidence. And our Mark walks out of the war as the only Invincible in the multiverse whose world watched him fight himself and saw the difference. The exception, proven at last, at a price that makes the proof feel like a punishment. And the technicians, the ones who rebuilt Angstrom, deserve their own footnote in tonight's ledger, because the show hands them the oldest paradox in the Book of Debts. They heal him twice, and when he returns to them broken after the war and orders them to fix him again, they refuse, and the refusal is not moral. They want payment for all they have done. The man who can open a door to literally anywhere, who can pluck treasure from infinite worlds, is in debt, owned in the only way a being like him can be owned, by the 2 hands that know how to repair him. By the end of Season 3, they have healed him fully and negotiated themselves into a partnership, an arrangement to claim a world of their own. And the show closes the season with its most quietly ominous image of the multiverse era, the man of infinite doors, finally healthy, finally calm, working for his surgeons. Power without maintenance, the show keeps insisting, is not power. Every god in this story has a mechanic, and the mechanics always, eventually, present the bill, which leaves the question Season 3 plants and refuses to harvest, the one Cecil and the audience are both holding. If almost every Mark is a monster, what exactly is the ingredient that made ours the exception? The variance had his powers, his face, his father. The difference, whatever it is is not Viltrumite. The show's quiet answer, never stated, always staged, is sitting at the kitchen table in every episode, and her name is Debbie Grayson. But before we get to the family at the center of everything, there is one more impossible person to account for. The woman who can rearrange the universe down to the atom except for the one category of matter that matters, and whose own body is the show's most beautiful unsolved equation. On paper, Samantha Eve Wilkins is the most powerful being in the series. Her ability is not strength or speed or any of the blunt Viltrumite virtues. It is authorship. Adam Eve manipulates matter and energy at the atomic level, takes the universe apart and reassembles it by thought, turns rubble into housing, pollution into clean water, anything into anything. A being like that does not need to win fights. A being like that can simply edit the fight out of the document. And yet, for season after season, Eve fights like a superhero instead of a god, blasts and barriers and exhaustion, and the show plants the reason early and lets it sit there like an unexploded shell. There is a wall in her power. She cannot affect living things. The one category of matter her authorship refuses is the category that suffers. The Adam Eve special, the standalone episode the franchise released in July of 2023, goes back 18 years to explain where she and the wall came from, and the origin reframes everything about her. Eve was not born so much as commissioned. A government program, a scientist named Dr. Elias Brandyworth, a dying mother named Polly, a superhuman child created to be a weapon, and a crisis of conscience that made Brandyworth do the one kind thing available to him. He swapped the infant with the Wilkins family's newborn, who had not survived birth, and let the weapon grow up as a daughter, ordinary, loved, unaware. Hold the identity paradox in that swap for a second, because the show never spells it out. Eve is a girl living a dead child's life. The name Samantha Eve Wilkins belonged to someone else first, someone who never got to use it. Her parents' love for her began as grief for another, transferred in a hospital blanket, and everything warm in her childhood stands on a substitution nobody in the house knows happened. The Maulers argue about which of them is the original. Eve never gets to argue. She is the copy of nothing, the original of nothing, a person grown in the space where a different person should have been. And the program that made her did not stop trying. The special's darkest material, the part that still startles me for existing in a surprise summer release, is the children. The government's attempts to recreate Eve produced a group of deformed, degrading kids, failed drafts of her, weaponized anyway, aimed at her by the man running the program. Eve has to fight them, and the show makes you sit with what they are. Not monsters, versions, the bodies she could have had, the lives she was one administrative decision away from living. When the children die of their own failing biology, the series files the deaths quietly, no triumph in them, and hands Eve her first full look at the truth of herself. That she is the success defined by a row of graves, the one who happened to come out whole. Every clone paradox tonight has been about which copy is real. Hers is crueler. All her copies were real, and none of them got to be her. The special ends with the program's enforcer, Steven Erikson, having murdered both Brandyworth and Polly, the two people who knew her truth, and with Eve standing over the man with the power to do absolutely anything to him. What she does is the most philosophically loaded act in the franchise. She erases his memories. No death, no cage, just deletion. The man walks on as a stranger to his own crimes. And after everything tonight has established about this show's machinery of identity, about Donald, about Rudy, about memory being the only instrument a self has, you can hear what that mercy actually is. Eve unmade a person without stopping his heart. If a Mauler with new memories is, by any honest reading, a new man, then Erikson, scrubbed clean, may no longer exist at all, and the punishment Eve invented in that room is its own paradox. An execution with a survivor, a killing the show can frame as restraint precisely because the body keeps walking. The girl who cannot affect living things found the one way to end a man without touching him. Because the wall, the block on living matter, is the heart of her, and the show is deliberate about what the wall is made of. It is not physics, it is her. A mental block, subconscious, self-imposed, the kind of limit a mind builds when a child learns that her power is the reason people die, that being what she is got her birth mother taken, got her creator hunted, filled a ward with failing copies. The argument here, flagged as the essay's reading, is that Eve's limit is the show's most humane paradox, a conscience expressed as a disability. She is the only character whose powers come pre-installed with their own ethics, a god who chained herself in the crib, and the chain is indistinguishable from a wound. The series spends seasons letting her chafe against it. Her Season 1 arc already had her walking away from licensed, televised heroism to rebuild homes and purify water. The most radical thing any hero in the show ever does, using power as authorship instead of as violence. The show hands its biggest question: what is strength actually for? To the one character structurally forbidden from using hers on people, and lets her answer it better than anyone with fists. And then the Season 3 finale takes the wall down, for one scene, in the worst possible circumstances, and it is the single most consequential moment of power use in the series. The conquest battle has broken everyone. Oliver is down. Eve herself is injured beyond saving, dying in the wreckage while Mark is beaten toward his own death a few hundred meters away. And at the bottom of everything, the show lets her do it. She temporarily overcomes the block, turns her authorship inward, on living matter, on the only living matter she has standing, and reconstructs her own body, rebuilding herself from the inside, and comes back from it, changed enough to burn Conquest's skin from his frame and end the fight that was about to end everything. One scene. The wall comes down once, at the point of death, to save the person the block exists inside of, and then the show closes the door again and has the decency not to explain. But think about what walked out of that crater, because the show certainly is thinking about it. If Eve's mind can rebuild Eve's body, then Eve's continued existence is now, at some level, a choice her power makes. The oldest fan conversation about her comic counterpart, and I will keep it general and flagged, has always circled exactly this territory. The idea that a being who can reconstruct herself has quietly stopped being mortal in any normal sense. That death for her may have become less a wall than a negotiation. The show has committed to nothing. What it has committed to is the image. The girl whose whole life is a substitution. The success of a program of dead copies. The god who chained herself, standing alive in the ruins because, at the final audit, her deepest limit turned out to have an exception clause written in her own handwriting. Every power in this series tells you what its holder fears. Mark's invulnerability fails because his fear is failing others. Eve's authorship stops at skin because her fear is what she is. The strongest person in the show is the one who needs permission from her own subconscious to exist at full strength. And she has received that permission exactly once, and what it cost her is a question the series has left, deliberately, on the table. Eve's whole life, in other words, is an identity wearing another identity, sustained by a power pretending to be smaller than it is. And she is not even the only one on her team, because standing right there in the Guardians lineup, cheerful, beloved, and slightly wrong in every frame, is a person whose entire existence on Earth is a borrowed face, and whose real story is the show's strangest answer yet to the question of what an imposter owes the life he stole. Shapesmith is introduced as a joke that nobody on screen is in on. A new superhero, gleaming and square-jawed, with a voice that hits every heroic syllable slightly too hard, like a commercial for a hero rather than the hero itself. Performed by Ben Schwartz at maximum uncanny enthusiasm. The audience knows immediately that something is off. The cast takes considerably longer. And the truth, when the show unpacks it, is a paradox stacked on a crime, stacked on a comedy. Shapesmith is a Martian, a shapeshifter, and the human face he wears belongs to a real man, an astronaut named Russ Livingston, whose place he secretly took during the first crewed mission to Mars back in the 4th episode of Season 1, while the real Russ was left behind on a hostile planet wearing Shapesmith's old life. Lay the exchange out plainly, because the plainness is the horror. A Martian wanted to be human, wanted Earth, wanted the bright, loud world he had watched from a distance. So he swapped himself for a man. The man he swapped with was then possessed by the Sequids, the parasitic swarm the Martians spend their whole civilization suppressing, which is precisely the catastrophe Martian society existed to prevent, and which now had a human nervous system to learn from. Every chapter of the Sequid threat that follows, the quarantine of Mars, the invasion attempts, the armada of possessed bodies Roos eventually commands, all of it flows from one homesick shapeshifter's selfish wish. Shapesmith is, by body count of consequences, one of the most destructive individuals in the series. He is also, scene to scene, one of its gentlest, most eager to please characters. A being who wants so badly to be a good Earth person that he has essentially method acted himself into sincerity. Both of those facts are canon. The show files them in the same person and lets them grind. His paradox is, the identity question tonight keeps circling, run in reverse. Rudy escaped his body and kept his self. Donald kept his post and questioned his self. Shapesmith abandoned both body and self, took a stranger's face, a stranger's name, a stranger's job, and then did something the show treats with surprising tenderness. He committed to it. The disguise stopped being a disguise somewhere along the way and became a practice. A daily act of choosing to be the helpful, honest, slightly ridiculous hero that Russ Livingston's face seemed to promise. When his deception finally surfaces, the fallout is real, and his attempts to fix what he caused are clumsy and costly. But the show never quite lets you write him off, because his remorse is the realest thing about him. The imposter is sincere. The stolen life is being lived better than the thief's original one. Read this way: Shapesmith is the show's strangest argument that a self is a performance that hardens into truth. That if you wear a mask of decency long enough, with enough commitment, the mask stops being distinguishable from a face. The Maulers cannot prove who is original. Shapesmith has stopped needing to. He decided who he is, daily, in public, and the decision, repeated enough times, became the fact. And the cosmic punchline, the one the show sets up across 2 seasons, is that his crime keeps insisting on being paid for in exactly the currency he dealt. He stole an identity, so the Sequids steal identities by the thousand, hollowing out human bodies into a single coordinated will. The dark mirror of shapeshifting, imitation with no person left inside the imitation. The villain armada of possessed humans that gathers around the real Russ Livingston is what identity theft looks like when nobody is performing decency on the other end. The show, as usual, declines to underline the symmetry. It just leaves the two of them in the same storyline. The Martian who became someone by pretending, and the swarm that unbecomes everyone it touches, and lets the audience notice which side of that line every other paradox in the series is fighting to stay on. Which raises the institutional question. An agency that knowingly fields a Martian imposter on its premier superhero team is an agency with a very particular relationship to truth. And that agency, the one under the Pentagon White Rooms, the one with the resurrection files and the man with the teleporter, runs on a paradox so old the show treats it as furniture. The safest place on Earth is administered by the most dangerous bargains on it. The Global Defense Agency is the show's answer to a question most superhero stories are too polite to ask, which is who, exactly, is managing all this? Cecil Stedman's agency watches everything, funds everything, cleans up everything, and over 4 seasons the series opens its books one drawer at a time, and every drawer contains the same paradox in a different shape. The GDA keeps the world safe using exclusively things that make the world unsafe. Inventory the drawers. The agency's medical wing can revive the dead, a technology it shares with no one, administered through resurrections it does not always disclose, including, as we covered, to the resurrected. Its contingency force, mass-produced from Season 1's finale onward, is the Reaniman, cyborg soldiers built on human corpses, the invention of D.A. Sinclair, a man the audience first meets turning living students into screaming prototypes. Cecil does not imprison Sinclair so much as acquire him, the way you acquire a startup, and when Mark discovers in Season 3 that the man who mutilated his classmates now has a government lab and a production line, the discovery breaks their relationship in half. The agency's leash on Mark himself turns out to be literal, a sonic device implanted in his skull, tuned to the frequencies of a kaiju's roar, installed without consent and activated the moment Cecil decides the boy is a threat. There is a room, the White Room, built specifically to contain or kill the strongest beings the agency works with, which means every friendly briefing Cecil ever gave Mark happened a few floors above the architecture for ending him. And in the Season 3 finale, the audience learns the newest drawer, Conquest. The Viltrumite who nearly ended the world is not dead, the body is in GDA custody, comatose, kept secretly underground for interrogation, a fact Cecil shares with no one but Donald. The agency protecting Earth from Viltrumites is warehousing one beneath it. Each of those items, on its own, is defensible, and Cecil, given the floor, defends them eloquently every season. The threats are real. The math is real. Sinclair's monsters held the line in battles that would otherwise have been lost. The implant existed because a second Omni-Man scenario was not a hypothetical. It was a family history. Conquest, alive, is intelligence on an empire that is coming back. Every monstrous instrument in the building has already paid for itself and prevented catastrophes, and Cecil's personal arc, the flashback the show gives him in Season 3, establishes that he was forged by exactly one conviction, that the polite version of this job gets people killed. The paradox is not that he is wrong, the paradox is that he is right, provably, repeatedly right, and the sum of all his rightness is an institution that no sane person could look at whole and call safe. Every individual bargain holds. The portfolio is a doomsday machine with a customer service department. The show's name for this paradox, the older one, the theological one, walks through the first season in a trench coat with horns. Damien Darkblood, demon detective, is the series' strangest early figure and its most pointed. A creature escaped from hell who solves crimes among the living. The canon explicit that he does justice to save his own soul, working off a damnation one closed case at a time. The temperature drops when he enters a room. Children cry near him. And he is, in the entire first season, the single most morally uncomplicated character on screen. The only investigator actually pursuing the truth about the Guardian's murders, while everyone above him manages optics. Hold the shape of him against the agency he works for. A demon doing good for selfish reasons, climbing toward grace. An agency doing evil for selfless reasons, descending into bargains. The show puts the two of them in the same scenes and lets the symmetry hum, the damned thing seeking redemption inside the institution busy earning damnation responsibly. And then Cecil exiles him. Not for failing, for succeeding. Darkblood gets too close to the Omni-Man truth too early. At a moment when Cecil judges that exposing the strongest being on Earth before a countermove exists would simply start the apocalypse on a worse schedule. And so the Gida banishes the detective back to hell, the one place that will hold him, for the crime of being correct prematurely. Sit with that sentence. The agency that exists to find and stop threats sent its best truth finder to hell because the truth was inconveniently timed. It is the institutional paradox in its purest crystal, the system protecting the world from the fact it most needed, and the show, with a patience that should frighten you, lets the bill age for 3 seasons before presenting it. Because Darkblood does not stay down. The Season 3 finale shows him in hell, bargaining with a demon overlord about reinstatement, about exploiting a powerful being on Earth, and Season 4's most argued about episode opens the door the rest of the way. The detective the Gada threw downstairs has become a door through which downstairs now knows Earth's address. The argument here, and I will flag it as the essay's reading, is that Cecil's agency is the show's portrait of every security institution that ever existed, rendered in superhero scale. It is not corrupt. Corruption would be simpler. It is sincere, competent, and structurally incapable of noticing the moment its protections become the threat inventory. Because every single acquisition was justified the day it was made. The Gda never decides to become dangerous. It compiles into dangerous, one reasonable bargain at a time, and the audit, when it comes, will not be performed by an oversight committee. It will be performed by the things in the drawers. And the drawers do not even hold the agency's strangest asset. Because the strangest asset is not an object at all. It is a capability, the one the whole institution is quietest about, the one that rewrites what death itself means depending on who you are and what you are worth to the building. Before we take that meeting, though, dwell for a moment on the resurrection files themselves, because the Gida's strangest power is not a weapon at all. And it produces the most uncomfortable paradox in the show's social order. The agency can, under the right conditions, reverse death. Not always, not cleanly, but the catalog of returns is long and canonical. The immortal, recovered and rebuilt after each killing. Donald, restored from destruction more times than he was told. Rick Sheridan, reassembled from what Sinclair left of him. Monster Girl, healed in Season 1 through means robot assembled when medicine failed. Black Samson, nursed from the edge. The white corridors under the world have a door death has to knock on. Now set that catalog next to the other list the show keeps, the one it never stops keeping. Chicago, the bystanders of the Invincible War, the crowds beneath the conquest battle. The civilians this series kills in the tens of thousands, on screen, specifically so that its violence will mean something, and for whom no white corridor ever opens. The paradox, stated plainly, is that mortality in this universe is two-tiered. Death is negotiable for the connected, the powered, the agency adjacent, the people whose bodies are worth the line item, and absolute for everyone else. The show never speechifies about it, but it knows, and it shows you that it knows. Because the series' most wrenching grief scenes belong almost exclusively to civilians, to the widow Olga, to the families at memorials, to Theo, the widower of a slain guardian who attends a support group for superhero spouses and extends his grief to Debbie right up until he learns whose wife she was. At which point his sympathy turns to ash in front of her, because her loss came with a resurrection file and a government pension, and his came with a coffin. The two-tier system is not a plot hole. It is the show's quietest class portrait, a world where even dying is a privilege gradient, and the agency administering the gradient answers, as we have established, to no one. And the design of it tells you something the show otherwise withholds. Every revival in the catalog was performed because the asset was needed, not because the person was loved. The love came from elsewhere, from teammates and mothers and boyfriends, but the funding came from need, and the show is fastidious about never letting you forget which signature actually opens the corridor. Cecil does not resurrect people, he redeploys them. The kindest reading of the G Does Death Reversal program is that it is triage at civilizational scale. The honest reading sits closer to inventory management, and the people inside the program, Donald above all, have read their own files and made their peace, or something wearing peace's clothes. There may be no purer expression of this show's view of institutions than the fact that its afterlife has an eligibility requirement, which is, of course, the bleakest possible joke, because this universe contains an actual afterlife with an actual eligibility requirement and an actual administration. The show's vision of where the unresurrected go is not a metaphor. It is a jurisdiction, with a detective who escaped it and a management structure with opinions about Earth. And in Season 4, for one notorious episode, the series finally sent its hero downstairs to take the meeting. The fourth episode of Season 4 is called Herm, and it is, by the audience's own scoreboard, the most divisive chapter the show has ever aired. An invented-for-television detour in which Mark ends up in hell itself, allying with Satan, voiced with enormous relish by Bruce Campbell, against a villain named Volcanica, while a Slayer track howls over the fight. Most of the argument about the episode has been about canon, about whether a story Robert Kirkman made up fresh for the show counts as real Invincible. Tonight I want to set that argument aside and look at the episode the way this video looks at everything, because as a paradox, Herm is almost indecently rich. Start with where it sits. The episode directly follows Mark's confession to Art Rosenbaum, the broken-voiced accounting of everything the Conquest battle and the Invincible War cost, the dead he could not save, the violence he is learning to live inside. The show takes its guiltiest hero, the boy currently prosecuting himself around the clock in the courtroom of his own head, and then, in the very next episode, physically mails him to the place guilt thinks it belongs. The argument here, flagged as interpretation, is that hell in this episode is not a location. It is a verdict Mark has already passed on himself, rendered in brimstone so the audience can walk around inside it. The fandom asked what the hell episode had to do with anything. The answer, read this way, is everything. It is the season's thesis statement wearing a novelty costume. And the paradox at its center is the alliance. Mark teams up with Satan. The hero spends the episode fighting beside the literal proprietor of evil, because the immediate threat is worse, and the enemy of the moment outranks the enemy of the species. Now hold that against everything else we have covered tonight. It is Cecil's portfolio in miniature, the reasonable bargain with the unreasonable partner. It is the Coalition's dilemma, allying with Nolan, the Empire's bloodiest hand, because the Empire is worse. It is Mark's own Season 3 promise, the willingness to do dark things for the right reasons, taken to its theological maximum. The show, in its silliest episode, is running its most serious experiment, asking whether the logic of the lesser evil has a floor, and answering. Apparently not. The logic works in hell too. The handshake extends all the way down. The fandom rated the episode into the ground for being unfaithful to the comics. As a chapter in the show's long argument about compromise, it could not be more faithful. It is the argument, italicized, there is one more resident of the underworld ledger worth a moment, because his paradox predates Hell's. Titan, the stone-skinned enforcer introduced in Season 1, is the show's working-class villain, and the show is explicit about the chip on his shoulder, a man from poverty who believes, with evidence, that the capes overhead do not look down at neighborhoods like his except to land fights on them. His Season 1 arc is a heist disguised as a team-up. He recruits Mark to help him take down his boss, the crime lord Machine Head, presenting it as liberation, and it is, technically, the neighborhood does end up free of Machine Head. It also ends up belonging to Titan, who walks out of the operation holding the entire criminal organization, having used a superhero as the crowbar. And then the show does the thing the show always does. It refuses to let the con be just a con. Titan, in power, protects people. The canon description of his operation is that he works to look after the overlooked, the blocks the heroes never patrol, and by season 3 he is shielding his family and his territory from worse predators, Mr. Liu and the Order. Monsters that make his own rule look like municipal government, a criminal who provides what the heroes do not, in a show where the official protectors keep leveling cities. The paradox is not that Titan is secretly good, it is that the categories the show inherited, hero and villain, keep failing to predict who actually keeps anyone safe. Which brings us, by the low road, to the most breakable people in the series. The ones with no powers at all, who live their whole lives one wrong address away from the blast radius, and to the quiet identity riddle the show has been running through the gentlest romance it has. William Clockwell is Mark's best friend, fully human, fully unarmored, and structurally the most endangered person in the cast. A civilian whose two closest relationships are with a superhero and with the chaos that follows superheroes home. The show has used him since season 1 as its measure of collateral, the person whose presence in a scene tells you the stakes have found the ground floor. And season 1 hands him the series' cruelest civilian storyline. His crush, then boyfriend, Rick Sheridan, is taken by D.A. Sinclair and converted into a reaniman, flesh and machine fused, the boy he liked rebuilt into equipment. Rick survives. In the show's terms, the Gida recovers him, repairs what can be repaired, and the seasons since have kept him in the cast, healing, struggling, loved, and the question the show has the restraint never to ask out loud. The question that belongs in tonight's collection is the Donald question, pointed at a romance. How much of Rick came back? The body is partly replaced. The memories have holes the show acknowledges. William, the person who knew him best, is now in the position of loving a man who is, by some percentage no one can calculate, a reconstruction, and choosing, scene by scene, to treat continuity of heart as the only continuity that counts. Read this way. William, the weakest person in the show, is quietly running the same experiment as the Gida's resurrection wing and the Mauler tank and Rudy's vat, with one difference. Everyone else asks whether the copy is real. William just asks whether the person in front of him needs breakfast. It is the only answer to the identity paradox the series has ever endorsed, and it endorses it by never calling attention to it. Identity, in this show's deepest grammar, is not proven, it is honored. And maybe that is the right key for the strangest meta-paradox of all, the one the series itself is. Because the show, remember, is a copy, an adaptation. A new body grown from the Dina of a comic that ran 144 issues and ended on Valentine's Day of 2018, written by the same man who is now writing the copy. Robert Kirkman, adapting Invincible, is Rudy building the clone, the original author transferring the story's consciousness into a younger, stronger body. Euthanizing pieces of the source as he goes, an episode invented here, a character rewritten there, and the fandom's endless canon wars. All the arguments about whether the show is really invincible are just the Mahler argument at franchise scale, two versions of one story, each with a legitimate claim to being the original, arguing in a lab they share. The comic remembers being first. The show carries the same mind in newer muscle. The creator, who is both of them, has signed his answer in every interview where he says the show is simply where the story lives now. Identity is not proven. It is honored, weekly, on a streaming service, by the person the story belongs to, which leaves only the center of the labyrinth. Every paradox tonight, the clones, the clocks, the empires, the bargains, all of them spiral inward toward one kitchen in the suburbs, one family, one name. The boy who called himself Invincible, and the father who taught him what the word could not mean. Start with the name, because the name is the first paradox the show ever told you, and it told you in the title card. Mark Grayson chooses the name Invincible in the first episode, a 17-year-old picking the most aspirational word a superhero can wear, and the series then spends 4 seasons cataloging, with almost bureaucratic thoroughness, every way the word fails him. He is beaten into intensive care by his own father in the Season 1 finale. Season 2 ends with him bloodied in a wasteland dimension over the body of a man he believes he has murdered. Season 3 runs him through the Invincible War, and then through Conquest, a fight he survives by margins so thin the finale is mostly hospital. Season 4 opens with him broken in body and reputation, and closes with him conceding Earth itself to a quiet occupation. The boy named Unbeatable has, by any honest accounting, lost or half-lost every defining engagement of his career. The fandom jokes about it, the way fandoms joke about the thing the show is actually saying, and what the show is saying, read straight, is that the name was never a description. It is a wish, made by a kid the night his life still looked simple. And the entire series is the universe stress testing the wish. But the paradox has a second floor, because look at what he actually does after every loss. He gets up. Not metaphorically, the show is fanatical about the literal image, the broken body rising again, in Chicago, in the wasteland, in the crater Conquest leaves. Invincibility, the Empire's version, means never being hurt, and by that definition, Mark is the worst Viltrumite who ever lived. Invincibility, the show's revised definition, means nothing that hurts you gets to decide what you do next, and by that definition, the name has been accurate since episode 1. The series, with a patience bordering on stubbornness, is spending a decade relocating one word from the body to the will. That is the whole project. Everything else is staging. And the staging runs through one man. Nolan Grayson is the show's master paradox, the one all the others orbit, and his contradiction is stated, fully, in the Season 1 finale, in the most famous scene the series has produced. Standing over his half-dead son, having killed thousands to make a point, Nolan reaches for the Empire's catechism. Humans are cattle to a Viltrumite's lifespan. Debbie, the woman he married, closer to a pet than a partner. Everything Mark loves a rounding error against centuries. He says all of it. He has just spent an episode acting all of it. And then, given the chance to finish the conquest by finishing the boy, he cannot. And the show holds on his face as the creed and the cargo collide. And he flees the planet rather than resolve the contradiction. Because there is no resolution, both things are true. He believes humans are insects. He loves his insect wife and his insect son past the point of being able to function. The Empire trained the first belief into him over millennia. 20 years of breakfasts installed the second, and 20 years beat 2000. And Nolan's entire arc since, the Thraxan family, the prison, the tears he keeps having to explain to people who find them as confusing as he does, is one long, humiliating audit of which of his two truths was the real one. The fourth season is where the audit comes due, and the show, now reorganized around his past, fills in the missing ledger. The episode that walks through his Viltrumite upbringing reframes the monster as the product, a child processed by a machine that has been converting children into weapons for millennia, which absolves nothing. The show is scrupulous about that. Debbie's scenes with him remain a masterclass in unforgiving love, but it relocates the paradox one generation up. Nolan was somebody's Mark once. The Empire was his Nolan. The question the series has been asking through him since the beginning, the question one prominent review of Season 4, called the season's actual subject, is whether violence is inherited or chosen. And Nolan is the show's worst-case data point, the man who inherited it absolutely and is now, centuries late, attempting to choose his way out one act at a time. Whether that is redemption or just maintenance is a fight the fandom will never finish. The show's own position, characteristically, is just to keep him in frame, trying, next to the sons who are the experiment's next iteration. Which brings us to the finale of Season 4, and the deal and the most elegant trap the series has ever closed around its hero. The Viltrumite War ends without ending. Thrag, the Empire's regent, the strongest of them, arrives not with an armada, but with an ultimatum, delivered on Earth, in person, with the war's true arithmetic finally on the table. 37 Viltrumites remain. They are already here, dispersed among the population, indistinguishable, hostages and occupiers at once. The offer is silence for silence. The Empire will rebuild itself quietly, through human bloodlines, harming no one, asking only that no one come looking, and any attempt to find them, by Mark, by Cecil, by the Coalition, converts every hidden Viltrumite into a detonation, and the planet into a casualty list with billions of entries. Mark, after a season of visions in which everyone he loves dies in red mist, runs the math his father once ran in reverse, and accepts. Hold the shape of that ending against everything tonight has built, because it is all of it at once. The Empire of 37, the haunted house bluff we covered an hour ago, has perfected itself, an occupation made entirely of secrecy, an army whose entire arsenal is the fact of being uncountable. Mark's acceptance is Cecil's portfolio, the reasonable bargain with the unreasonable partner, signed by the boy who once ended his relationship with Cecil over exactly this kind of math. The hybrid breeding program, the Empire's paradox of manufacturing its own destroyers, is now Earth's official future, written into a peace treaty no one else knows exists. And the hero called Invincible has won the war by conceding the planet, achieved a victory administratively indistinguishable from surrender, protected everyone by agreeing to protect the enemy too. The show's title has never been more ironic or more accurate in the same frame. Nothing hurt him into it. He stood in the wreckage, fully informed, and chose the unbearable option that keeps the most people breathing. It is either his finest hour or his father's first victory over him. And the cruel elegance of the ending is that those might be the same thing. And the post-credits scene, the last image the franchise has given us as of tonight, sharpens the whole machine to a point. Alan, inheriting the Coalition, discovers Thetis' final bequest, the perfected Scourge virus, the extinction option, accompanied by the dead founder's conclusion that the universe is never safe while any Viltrumite lives. Any Viltrumite. The category now includes Nolan, who is trying, Oliver, who is learning, the 37 hidden among the humans they may one day love, and Mark Grayson, the exception, the proof the whole catalog of universes apparently produced only once. The kindest weapon ever built is holding a cure whose price is the species of the kindest people he knows, and somewhere on Earth, the boy the virus would also kill has just signed a secret peace to protect the species that would deploy it. Every paradox in the show is now load-bearing in a single standoff. The Season 5 the franchise has already promised will inherit that geometry, and I do not envy it. And yet, the board still has pieces we have not turned over. Smaller ones, quieter ones, paradoxes that do not run empires or open portals, but just live in the corners of this show, in the supporting cast, in the villain's wing, in the kitchen. Before the night closes, they deserve their minutes too, because some of the series' finest contradictions are hiding in the people the Marquis never mentions. Start with the loudest of them, because his paradox took 3 seasons to finish assembling, and when it finished, it broke the fandom's heart. Rex Sloan, Rexplode, enters the series as its most complete jerk. The teen team's resident ego, a young man whose power is converting whatever he touches into an explosive, and whose personality in Season 1 appears to run on the same mechanism. He is introduced cheating on Adam Eve with Duplicate, a detail the show plays for exactly the contempt it deserves. And his early function in the ensemble is Friction, the guy who needles Mark, who jokes at funerals, who treats the work like a stage. If you had polled the audience in Season 1 about which Guardian the show could lose without cost, Rex wins in a landslide. The power fit the man. Things he touched blew up. And then the show ran its longest, quietest experiment on him. After the Guardians' catastrophic failures, after Omni-Man's betrayal reshuffled everyone's sense of what the job was, Rex begins, almost invisibly, to grow. The canon marks the beats. He matures through Season 2's brutal missions, survives being shot through the head in the Lizard League raid that maims Ray and seems to kill Kate, and comes out the other side of that recovery as something the show had never let him be. Steady, by Season 3 he is the Guardian who shows up, the one consoling teammates. The one whose jokes have turned from weapons into shelter. The man whose power is destabilizing matter becomes the most stabilizing presence on the roster. The show never announces the inversion. It just lets you notice, sometime around the scene where Ray confesses her retirement plans and kisses him, that the team's bomb has become its foundation. Which is precisely when the series cashes him in, and the manner of it is the paradox perfected. In the Invincible War, Episode 7 of Season 3, facing an evil variant of Mark that the surviving Guardians cannot stop, Rex holds the line so the others can live, and when his body has nothing left to throw, he uses the only matter still in reach. He reaches into his own wound, takes hold of his own skeleton, and charges it. The man who spent 3 seasons learning to stop destroying things performs, as his final act, the most complete destruction his power allows, of himself, and it is the most constructive thing anyone does in the entire war, buying with one body the lives of Rudy, Monster Girl, and Bulletproof. The power never changed. The direction did. Rexplode's whole arc is the show's thesis about strength compressed into a single grim physics problem. That what a power means depends entirely on what it is pointed at, and that the same blast that makes a man a menace makes him, pointed the other way, a door held open. The funeral holds. The name, as we covered, walks on, carried by a friend wearing his genome. The show does not do clean deaths, it does conservation of meaning. And then there is the woman the entire series secretly orbits, the one whose paradox is so large it is almost invisible, the way you cannot see a building you are standing inside. Debbie Grayson has no powers. In a cast of gods, clones, demons, and empires, she is a real estate agent. And the show's deepest structural joke, the one it never tells out loud, is that she is the strongest person in it, and the evidence has been on screen since season 1. Consider what the series actually asks of her, sequence by sequence. She spends 20 years married to the most powerful being on the planet, the only person on Earth for whom that marriage is just a marriage. Dinner, laundry. A man who forgets things. Then season 1 hands her the detective arc the show could have given to anyone, and chooses her, the wife. It is Debbie who notices the inconsistencies, Debbie who finds Damien Darkblood's notepad, Debbie who pulls the bloodied suit from its hiding place and brings it to Art Rosenbaum and stands there while the confirmation arrives. That the man she loves murdered the Guardians of the Globe. The strongest beings in the series learn the truth about Omni-Man by being beaten with it. Debbie learns it the human way, alone, in a tailor's back room, with no powers to absorb the blow, and the show then makes her sit at breakfast with the truth across the table, gathering evidence against the father of her child while he kisses her goodbye. There is no scene in the entire franchise that requires more raw nerve than those quiet kitchen mornings, and the show knows it. Which is why the season's emotional finale is not on the battlefield at all. It is Nolan, mid-atrocity, declaring to the world's cameras that his wife was like a pet to him. And the series then spends 3 seasons demonstrating, through his every tear and failure, that the sentence was the lie he needed to be able to leave. The Empire's perfect weapon fled the planet rather than keep lying about loving a human being. That is Debbie's power. She is the proof, the living counterexample to 2,000 years of Viltrumite catechism. The rounding error that unrounded a god. But the show is not finished with her, because grief is only her first labor. What does Debbie Grayson do after the man who called her a pet leaves a crater where her life was? She survives it, barely. The show is honest about the drinking and the support group and the bad nights. And then season 2 arrives at her door carrying the single most outrageous request in the series. Nolan's new son, Oliver, the child of her husband and an alien woman, orphaned into Mark's arms, with nowhere on 2 worlds to grow up. And Debbie takes him, raises him, loves him, visibly, specifically, not as a duty, but as a choice renewed daily. The woman with the most justified grievance in the galaxy, mothering the living evidence of it. The argument here, and I will flag it as the essay's reading, though I barely think it needs the flag, is that this is the show's single greatest act of heroism, performed by its only unpowered lead, and that the series knows exactly what it built. Because when the writers want to explain why our Mark is the one variant in the multiverse who came out kind, they never once point at his father. The camera does it for them. Every monstrous Mark and Angstrom's catalog had Nolan, only ours had her. So the strongest person in the show cannot bend steel. And the paradox is not a riddle at all once you say it plainly. Power, in this series, is the capacity to absorb harm without converting it into more harm, and by that metric Debbie Grayson outclasses the entire Viltrumite species. They conquer planets and cannot survive a feeling. She survived the feeling, all of them, and conquered nothing, and kept a family alive on the far side of the worst truth a marriage ever produced. The Empire breeds for invincibility. It has never once produced it. The kitchen did. There is a smaller, sharper version of Debbie's clarity in the show's first season, and it belongs, of all people, to a high school student. Amber Bennett's paradox is procedural, and most of the audience was too busy arguing about her to notice it. The masked hero's entire model of love rests on one assumption, that the secret protects the relationship, that the lie is a gift. Amber, in season 1, quietly falsifies the assumption from the other side. She works out that Mark is invincible on her own, months before he tells her, and says nothing, which means that, for months, the secret Mark is carefully maintaining to protect her is protecting no one. It is just a lie with good posture, and the only thing it is still doing is measuring, daily, how long he will keep choosing it. When the reveal finally comes, in the middle of catastrophe, Mark expects absolution and receives the audit instead. The truth, deployed as a rescue, arrives too late to be one. The paradox is clean enough to teach in a class. A protective lie protects only until the other person knows, after which it converts, silently, into pure damage, and the liar is always the last to learn the conversion happened. The fandom spent a year arguing about whether Amber was unfair. The show was using her to dismantle the secret identity, the genre's oldest furniture. And the demolition was so quiet, most of the audience mistook it for a relationship subplot. Now cross the aisle. because the villain's wing keeps its own collection, and the finest piece in it walks on 4 legs and speaks in subtitles of pure contempt. Battle Beast, the white-furred alien warrior voiced by Michael Dorn, is introduced in Season 1's 5th episode, doing something no villain in the series does: losing interest. Hired muscle in a gang war, he hospitalizes Mark, Black Samson, and Monster Girl in a fight that lasts about as long as a commercial. And then, surveying the broken children at his feet, he does not finish them. He leaves, openly disgusted, insulted by the ease of it, a conqueror walking away from a conquered field because the conquest cost him nothing. The show then spends 3 seasons letting his paradox unfold across the galaxy. Battle Beast is the strongest fighter in almost every room he enters, and the only thing he wants is a room where that is not true. He is strength in search of its own refutation, a warrior whose religion is the worthy opponent, which means his entire existence is a pilgrimage toward the being who can end it. Read this way: he is the immortal's paradox wearing a lion's body. The Deathless King begged Mark for an ending across 10,000 years of accumulated weariness. Battle Beast hunts for his ending professionally, joyfully, calling it honor, and when Season 4 finally hands him the Viltrumite War and a regent named Thrag. The show grants its most violent character the thing it grants almost no one: a fight he can lose. The strongest thing a warrior can seek, the show has him demonstrate, is the limit of his strength. Everything else is pest control. His opposite number in the collection is a man the show plays entirely for comedy, which is exactly why the horror underneath him goes down so easy. Doc Seismic, the mad scientist with the earthquake bracelets, attacks Mount Rushmore in Season 1, ranting about the crimes of the men carved into it, and the running gag, stated in the show's own character canon, is that his weapons concuss him every time he uses them. Each blast rattles his brain. Each use of his power damages, specifically, the organ doing the believing. The revolutionary's instrument erases the revolutionary, attack by attack, and the show lets you watch the personality dissolve across appearances, the rhetoric looping, the grievance outliving the reasoning that built it. It is a joke villain carrying one of the series' meanest ideas, that a cause prosecuted with self-destroying tools eventually becomes pure prosecution. No cause left. The bracelets still firing long after the argument has been shaken out of the man wearing them. Somewhere between Battle Beast, who wants his power to fail him, and Doc Seismic, whose power fails him with every use and who never notices, the show has sketched the entire comedy of force. And then there is the house guest nobody upstairs talks about. Conquest arrives at the end of Season 3 like a bill collector for the entire series, an aged Viltrumite, scarred, half-mechanical, sent to audit Earth's subjugation, and the show gives him the most honest name in its universe, because the name is the whole psychology. Conquest does not want Earth. He wants the taking of Earth. The canon is right there in his introduction. He surveys Mark's lack of progress and is disappointed, and the disappointment is not bureaucratic. It is appetite. The show letting you see a being who has organized his entire interminable Viltrumite lifespan around the only moments that still reach him through the scar tissue, the moments something fights back. He is the Empire's paradox made flesh and pension-aged, a conqueror who needs resistance the way the rest of us need food, which means every victory starves him and every worthy enemy is the closest thing he has to a friend. The fight he and Mark have, the one that maims a city and nearly everyone in it, is, from his side of the ledger, the best day he has had in centuries. And the show's final twist on him is pure Cecil. Mark seemingly kills him, the world believes it, and the Season 3 finale quietly corrects the record for the audience alone. The body is alive, comatose, warehoused in a secret level of the G-Da, an apex predator filed in a drawer, the war trophy that is also, self-evidently, a countdown. The Empire's hungriest soldier now sleeps under the planet he came to collect. Inside the institution we have already established cannot stop acquiring things it cannot afford to own. Nothing in the show's pantry is labeled more clearly. Nothing in the show's history suggests the label will help. So the corners of the board hold the same lesson as its center. The cheater becomes the foundation and pays for it in bone. The housewife outlasts the Empire. The girlfriend dismantles the mask. The monster prays for defeat. The clown shakes his own beliefs apart, and the auditor of worlds sleeps in the basement of his own evidence. Wherever you cut this story, at whatever scale, the grain runs the same direction. Power is never the question. The question is what the power is for, and whether the person holding it can survive the answer. Step back far enough, and the whole series resolves into that one repeating figure, drawn at every size the medium allows. Take the figure at its most intimate scale. and you arrive at the strangest couple in the series, the romance the show has been conducting almost entirely in subtext and engineering sessions. Rudy and Amanda, the man in the cloned body and the woman aging in reverse. We have met them both separately tonight. The genius who copied himself out of a tank and into a teammate's borrowed genome. And Monster Girl, the heroine whose every transformation spends her own timeline backward 24 years old in a body sliding toward childhood. The show, with the precision this series brings to everything it pretends is casual, put them together. Look at the geometry of what it built. He is a consciousness that may or may not be its original, wearing a body younger than his mind by decades. She is unquestionably her original, trapped in a body growing younger than her mind by the day. He chose his wrongly aged body, committed the strangest act in the series to get it. Hers was forced on her by a curse. Every heroic act another withdrawal from a childhood she already spent once. He solved his prison with engineering, and so, in Season 3, he turns the same engineering on hers. The canon plain about it, Rudy working with Amanda to stop her powers from de-aging her, the man who escaped his own body laboring to keep the woman he loves inside hers. The show plays their scenes quiet, technical, two people at a workbench, and the workbench is the romance. Neither of them can offer the other a normal anything. What they offer instead is the one thing every paradox tonight has been starving for. A witness who understands the problem from the inside. He does not flinch at what she is becoming. She does not flinch at what he might not be. In a series where every identity is contested, the two most contested people in it have simply decided to vouch for each other, daily, at the atomic level of who counts as real, and the show files their arrangement, without comment, in the same drawer as all its other quiet definitions of love. The figure, drawn at couple scale, looks exactly like it looks at every other scale. Two impossibilities, holding, and the figure even shapes how the show tells its stories, because the first season's structure is itself a paradox. One of the boldest narrative gambles in modern television, and it is so fully absorbed into the show's reputation that people forget how strange it is. Season 1 of Invincible is a murder mystery in which the audience watches the murder happen in the first episode. There is no whodunit. The premiere ends with Omni-Man slaughtering the Guardians of the Globe in full view of the camera, alone. Unambiguous. And then the season spends 7 more episodes following characters who do not know what we know, Cecil quietly assembling evidence, Damien Darkblood interrogating his way toward the truth, Debbie discovering the bloodied suit, the world mourning beside the killer at the funeral. Every rule of mystery writing says this should not work. The genre runs on withheld information, and the show withholds nothing. What it discovers instead, and this is the oldest trick in suspense, the bomb under the table that the audience can see and the characters cannot, is that knowing is worse. Every warm scene in that season is double exposed. Nolan training Mark in the backyard is a father bonding with his son and a weapon evaluating an asset, both at once, in the same frames, and the audience has to hold both readings for 8 episodes with no relief. The mystery is not who killed the Guardians. The mystery is which version of Nolan is real, and that question, unlike a whodunit, does not resolve when the detective names the culprit. It is the question the entire series is still asking 4 seasons later. The show traded 1 episode of surprise for 5 years of dread, and the trade built the franchise. Read this way, the structure of Season 1 is the show teaching you, in your own viewing experience, what Debbie's marriage felt like from the inside. You loved him while you knew. So did she. The swarm at the edge of the story runs the same experiment on identity that the structure runs on knowledge, and it deserves its minute before the night ends. The sequids, the parasites that infested Mars and possessed the real astronaut Bruce Livingston, are the show's photographic negative of Duplicate, and once you see the pairing, you cannot unsee it. Kate is one self-distributed across many bodies, a single person multiplied, every duplicate feeling everything. The most empathetic architecture a being could have, a consciousness that experiences its own losses by the dozen and keeps choosing to spend itself anyway. The sequids are the inversion, many organisms collapsed into one will, inhabiting bodies that used to be people. Individuality not multiplied, but deleted, a crowd with no one in it. The show stages its space horror arcs around the difference. When the possessed armada gathers around Roos, the threat is not violence exactly, it is subtraction. The prospect of a humanity that still walks and works and coordinates flawlessly and contains nobody. And the Martians, the civilization that organized itself entirely around containing the swarm, carry their own quiet paradox, a culture whose central institution is its prisoner, jailers whose identity is the thing in the cell. Shapesmith's whole catastrophe began because one Martian could not bear that his species' purpose was custodial. The show keeps insisting, in every register from comedy to cosmic horror, that a self is expensive, that someone always pays to maintain one, and that the alternatives, the swarm, the deletion, the smooth coordinated nobody, are always cheaper and always on offer. Which is why the most quietly radical thing in the series is two people trying to be a couple. Mark and Eve, the show's central romance, finally together as of season 3, are a love story between the two most powerful beings on Earth, and the show writes their obstacle with an actuary's coldness. It is not a villain, it is the clocks. Mark is half Viltrumite, his aging already slowing, his lifespan opening toward centuries, and the series planted the dread early and explicitly. In his father's wasteland argument that everyone a Viltrumite loves is a candle, Eve is the one person whose own biology might negotiate with that math, the woman who rebuilt her body from the inside once, whose relationship with mortality is, after the conquest battle, an open question the show has pointedly declined to close. Two people who cannot be broken by anything in the sky, sitting in an apartment they talked about renting, doing the one calculation no power affects, how long do we get? Their romance is the series' thesis run at the smallest scale, the same question Nolan failed, will you love what you will outlive, asked of the next generation with the answer genuinely undecided. Fans of the comic know the territory ahead, and have theorized endlessly about how much of it the show will keep. The show, as always, is saying nothing. It just keeps photographing the two of them in kitchens, which, by now, you and I both know is where this series keeps everything it actually believes. And notice, finally, what the two great wars of the series did to its names. Because the naming is its own small, perfect paradox. The war called the Invincible War was fought against Invincible, his face on every destroyer, his name on a catastrophe he did not commit. The war called the Viltrumite War was fought beside a Viltrumite, Nolan in the line next to his sons, the Empire's old executioner bleeding for the resistance. The names crossed somewhere over the battlefield. The hero's name became the enemy's banner, the enemy's name became the allies, and the show, which has been arguing since its first episode that names are wishes rather than descriptions, could not have asked for better evidence. Invincible was the name of the threat. Viltrumite was the name of the man holding the line. Whatever this series is about, it is not about what things are called. It is, however, very interested in what things are worn. Because there is a quiet priesthood in this series, a single recurring civilian who has dressed half the pantheon, and through him the show runs one more identity experiment that almost nobody clocks as an experiment. Art Rosenbaum, the superhero tailor, voiced by Mark Hamill, is an old man in a workshop who makes costumes, and the show treats his shop the way other stories treat temples. It is where Mark goes in the first episode to become invincible, the suit and the name arriving together, the wish-given fabric. It is where Nolan's friendship feels most human, two old colleagues talking shop. And it is where the truth lands first, because when Debbie needs to know what her husband is, she brings the evidence to Art, the bloodied suit, and the tailor reads the fabric the way a coroner reads a wound. The costume, the genre's silliest object, is in this show a legal document. It records what was claimed and what was done, and the gap between those two is, as always, where this series lives. Follow the wardrobe and you can read the whole story without dialogue. Mark begins in yellow and blue, colors chosen in a teenage afternoon, the brightest possible flag for the wish he was making. After everything, the wars, the guilt, the body counts, Season 3 opens with Art presenting him a new suit, and the episode is even named for the moment, You Want a Real Costume, Right? And the new suit is darker, the palette shifting toward blue and black, and the show does not say one word about symbolism because it does not have to. The boy who chose the bright flag is gone. The wardrobe buried him. The season's own title cards joined the experiment, glitching each episode through different colorways, the palettes of alternate suits, alternate marks. The variants of the Invincible War flickering behind the show's logo like a warning, your hero's look is one setting among thousands, and most of the others belong to monsters. Even the trademark goggles do their share of arguing. Clark Kent hides behind glasses. Mark Grayson fights behind them, a teenager's face deliberately kept boyish in frame, so that every atrocity that happens to him happens visibly to a kid. And then there is the inheritance rack. Oliver, given his first suit, names himself Kid Omni-Man, and the canon is explicit that Mark objects, tries to talk him out of carrying that brand, the name their family spends every waking hour living down, and Oliver keeps it anyway, because to him. Raised on the other side of the story, the name means his father, not the massacre. One brother sheds his colors to escape what he is becoming. The other puts on the most radioactive name on Earth to stay close to what he came from. Rudy, as we covered, completes the set, taking a dead friend's name to honor him, identity passed along like a coat that still smells of its owner. The show's costumes and names are a full circulatory system, claims being made, shed, inherited, laundered, and the tailor sits at the center of it, the one man who has measured all of them, who knows better than anyone in the cast that the suit never fits the person. The person grows toward the suit, or away from it, and either way, the fabric keeps the receipts. In a series obsessed with whether the original matters more than the copy, the costumes are the show's gentlest answer. Nobody is born any of these names. Every identity in the wardrobe is a copy of a wish, tailored, taken in, handed down, and the wearing is what makes it true. And if names and wardrobes deceive this fluently, you can guess how the show feels about threat assessments. And if names deceive in this universe, threat levels lie outright. Because here's a fact about the Guardians of the Globe that sounds wrong every time it is said aloud. The team that survived Omni-Man, the team that fought Viltrumite executioners and multiversal invasions, took its worst beating before the Invincible War from the Lizard League, the snake-themed goons. The villains the show itself treats as a punchline, a gang of namesake, costumed mid-tier criminals led by a man called King Lizard, an organization so unserious that its own succession drama, the canon notes this, involved a usurper named Supreme Lizard being killed by the returning king for trying to take over while he was in prison. These are the clowns of the Rogues Gallery, and it is their operation, the raid on a missile silo in Season 2, that ends with Shrinking Ray swallowed alive by Komodo Dragon, Rexplode shot through the head, and every visible duplicate of Duplicate destroyed. The single most damaging engagement in the team's history to that point, inflicted by enemies the heroes had every right to consider beneath them. The paradox is old military wisdom wearing scales, and the show stages it with documentary coldness. Gods lose to snakes the moment they stop looking. Power in this series is wildly non-linear. A being who can survive a Viltrumite can be killed by a man with a gun if the gun arrives during the yawn, and the Lizard League episode exists. Read this way. As the show's formal proof that danger is not a property of the enemy, it is a property of the attention you pay them. The same season makes the point from the other direction through Machine Head, the auto-tuned crime boss of Season 1, who is, on paper, one of the weakest figures in the cast, a man whose whole power is money. And money, it turns out, buys the one superpower the heroes do not have. He predicts their raid. He knows they are coming before they come, hires accordingly, and turns a heroic ambush into a meat grinder that puts Mark, Black Samson, and Monster Girl in intensive care, all without throwing a punch himself. Because the future, in sufficient quantities, is just another thing for sale. The strongest beings on Earth keep being undone by the two cheapest forces in it, inattention and information. And the show files both lessons without comment, the way it files everything. Black Samson deserves his own page in this section of the ledger, because his paradox is the inverse of everyone else's tonight. Samson is an original Guardian who lost his powers years before the series begins, and the detail that defines him is what he did next. He stayed. He had an armored suit built and kept fighting alongside gods as a man in a machine, the only member of the world's greatest superhero team with no superhuman anything, just the promise he had made and a stubborn refusal to let biology repossess it. The show gives him the veteran's role. He is the one who lectures the new roster in Season 1 about what their infighting costs the civilians below, the conscience of a team he is no longer qualified for on paper. And then the series plays its strangest card with him. Battle Beast nearly kills him, hospitalizes him into the deepest kind of broken, and it is there, at his physical minimum, that his powers return, surging back to accelerate his healing as if they had been waiting to see something first. The show offers no mechanism and no explanation. The man keeps the faith without the strength until the strength comes home, and the timing is either biology or a thesis, and this series does not believe in coincidental timing. Power, the show keeps arguing, follows commitment around like a consequence. Samson is the argument's cleanest exhibit, the Guardian who was a hero longest during the years he was, by every measurable standard, nothing of the kind. His teammate Bulletproof carries the joke version of the same idea in his name, a man called Untouchable, who lives through the Invincible War because Rexplode. The most touchable man on the team spends himself as the shield. The named invulnerable, saved by the fragile. The show's titles, as we established, are wishes. Its protections are people. So the lesson of the lower decks is the same lesson as the throne rooms, scaled down and somehow sharper for it. Nothing in this series is as strong as it is labeled or as weak as it is drawn. The clowns take the most blood. The powerless man keeps the oath. The bulletproof one is saved by a body. And the audience, trained by every other superhero property to read power levels like menus, keeps being reminded that this show does not serve from that menu, never has, and that the only stat it tracks with perfect consistency is the one no scanner in the JIDA can measure: whether you show up. Which is, when you think about it, the only superpower the show has ever let the audience share. And the place where the audience does its showing up, episode after episode, is not a battlefield. It is a house. The Grayson home is the most photographed location in the series, the kitchen above all, and once you notice how the show uses it, you realize the house is running its own quiet paradox, the one every other paradox tonight eventually visits. It is the least defended room in the show's universe, and everything is decided there. Count what the kitchen has hosted. Mark's powers announced over dinner in the first episode. Nolan's 20-year performance of humanity, conducted at that table 2 meals a day. The longest con in the series sustained by breakfasts. Debbie's season 1 detective work, run out of the same room she had to keep living in. The painting on the wall with its Korean lettering, the single word hello, the show's quietest acknowledgement of who this family is. April and Oliver's homework. Paul, eventually, invited in and told everything. The show's most powerful beings repeatedly cross half the galaxy, and the camera, with perfect stubbornness, keeps returning to a suburban interior where nobody can fly. And the series' enemies, who understand the show better than its genre does, keep aiming at exactly that room. The Season 2 finale's true horror is not the multiverse tour, it is Angstrom Levy standing in the Grayson house, holding Debbie and Oliver, the war finally arriving at the address every previous scene taught us was the one place it could not. The Empire wants Earth, Cecil wants Mark, Angstrom wants revenge. But what each of them actually moves against, when the decisive hour comes, is the kitchen. Because every faction in this story has independently performed the same analysis the show performs weekly. The kitchen is the capital. The fortress was never the White Room. It was the breakfast table, undefended, load-bearing, the most strategically important unfortified position in animation. There is one more paradox folded into how this show carries its weight, and it is the one your own body has probably noticed tonight, even if your mind has not. The series is funny, relentlessly, deliberately funny. And not in the margins, in the same scenes as the horror, sometimes in the same breath. This is the show that follows planetary trauma with a sitcom needle drop, that staffs its apocalypse with characters like Fightmaster and Dropkick, that runs a recurring gag across seasons about 2 archaeologists, Jane and Riley, disturbing the tomb of Kahor. A cutaway so disconnected from the main plot that its persistence became the joke, the B-story that refuses to matter while the world ends elsewhere. The fandom treats the comedy as seasoning. The argument here, flagged as the essay's reading, is that the comedy is structural, the other half of the show's central machine. A series this violent, played fully straight, would anesthetize you within a season, the atrocities compounding into noise. The jokes are what keep the nerve endings alive. Every laugh resensitizes you, resets the baseline, so that the next horror lands on fresh skin. The show is funny for the same reason its world is bright, the same reason its art style looks like a children's cartoon. Because contrast is the delivery mechanism, and the people who complain that the comedy undercuts the darkness have the physics exactly backward. The comedy is the reason the darkness still registers 4 seasons in, 2 registers, each keeping the other honest. The funniest show about grief on television, the saddest show about jokes. And the paradox dissolves the moment you stop expecting a story to be one thing, which the people in this story never get the luxury of being either, and the second season has a whole episode about precisely that, filed, as this show files everything important under a joke. There is one paradox left in the Season 2 files that the fandom mostly remembers as a joke, and it is the one with the oldest legal pedigree in human storytelling. Early in the season, Mark is made to answer for a murder he did not commit. Omni-Man, among his other crimes, killed Aquarius, the Piscine king of the Undersea Kingdom, a founding guardian and a head of state, and Atlantis wants justice. Nolan is gone, fled beyond every jurisdiction. And so the demand lands with the full weight of international, interspecies law on the next available Grayson. Mark is sent down to face Atlantean justice for his father's crime, and the episode plays the proceedings for escalating absurdity, an ancient custom involving the widowed queen, a trial that mutates into combat. The show wringing comedy out of the deep sea's legal system while Mark flails through it. The episode's own title is a punchline about the situation. The fandom laughed, clipped it, and moved on. But strip the comedy off, the way this show always invites you to, and look at what the sequence actually establishes, because it is the series' first formal statement of its deepest law. Guilt, in this universe, is hereditary. Not morally, the show is careful, nobody argues Mark is culpable, but practically, civically, gravitationally, the debt attaches to the bloodline, because the bloodline is what remains in reach. Mark spends that episode learning what the entire series will spend seasons confirming, that he will be answering for his father everywhere, forever. In courtrooms and prisons and the eyes of every hero who watches him a half-second too long. The Immortals' documented distrust of him in Season 2 is the same proceeding in slower motion. Cecil's implant was the same verdict, pre-rendered. The Atlantis episode is the show clearing its throat, telling you under cover of a gag what Powerplex will later scream and the Viltrumite War will later prove, that the sun inherits the ledger and that no quantity of personal innocence pays it down. There is a reason the series keeps photographing Mark next to the word Invincible while the world bills him for Omni-Man. The name he chose never had a chance against the name he was born with. And while the world prosecutes the family has been quietly dismantling the one defense superheroes are supposed to have, and almost nobody noticed it happening. The secret identity, the genre's load-bearing wall, dissolves in this show piece by piece across 4 seasons, and tracking the dissolution is like watching a tide go out. William deduces Mark's identity in Season 1, mid-crisis, and the sky does not fall. Amber, as we covered, solves it months before she is told. Eve knows from the beginning, the way colleagues know. Debbie has always known everything. And then Season 3 delivers the quietest landmark in the sequence, the one that genuinely startled the audience. Debbie, building a life with Paul, her colleague, the first gentle thing the show has given her in years, tells him, just tells him. Nolan, Mark, Oliver, the whole impossible household, disclosed across a kitchen table to a civilian boyfriend. And the show frames the anger Mark feels about it, and then, pointedly, declines to punish her for it. No villain plucks Paul's mind. No catastrophe traces back to the disclosure. The genre says the secret protects the family. Debbie, who has lived the genre from further inside than anyone alive, has clearly arrived at the opposite theology, that the secret is the thing that nearly killed the family, that 20 years of managed information was the soil her catastrophe grew in, and that a life she has to lie inside is not a life, it is a deployment. The argument here, flagged as the essay's reading, is that the show agrees with her, and has been agreeing all along, every season quietly widening the circle of people who know, every widening costing nothing, until the mask, the genre's most sacred object, stands revealed as what this series always suspected it was. Not protection. Rehearsal for the bigger lie. Because masks, in this story, are always a father's idea. The secret identity, the cover story, the travel writer alibi, all of it descends from Nolan, the man whose entire life on Earth was a maintained disclosure schedule. The children keep taking the masks off. William, Amber, Paul, kitchen by kitchen, truth by truth. And the show keeps rewarding them for it, and somewhere in that generational shedding, you can see the series' whole hope for its future, stated in its native language of quiet domestic choices. The Empire runs on secrecy about scarcity. The agency runs on drawers. The father ran on a false name. The children, one dinner table at a time, are choosing to be known. Whether that survives what Season 5 brings is an open question. The Thrag bargain is, after all, the biggest secret a Grayson has ever agreed to keep. The boy who watched secrecy hollow out his family has now signed the family up for the largest secret on Earth. And if the show's own physics hold, the bill for it is already in the mail. Inheritance, in this series, is the one delivery that never fails to arrive, which is why its last paradox, the one still in motion, belongs to 2 brothers. There is one more pairing to set down gently before we close, and it is the one the show has been building in plain sight across every season, the slow exchange happening between the 2 Grayson brothers. Watch the trajectories. Mark begins the series soft, a kid who has to learn violence the way other teenagers learn driving, reluctantly, badly, with his father shouting from the passenger seat. Season by season, loss by loss, the series hardens him, the killing of Angstrom, the promise to Oliver at the end of Season 3, the Thrag bargain at the end of Season 4. Each one a step toward the cold arithmetic his father once preached. Oliver begins the series as the arithmetic, a child who kills the Maulers and sleeps fine, and the seasons since have been softening him. Debbie's patience, Mark's example, the Thraxan half of him that loves at mayfly intensity. Season 4 showing him learning hesitation the way Mark once learned force. The brothers are two escalators moving in opposite directions, and somewhere between seasons they passed each other, and the show declined to mark the floor. The hero is descending toward the very pragmatism the child is climbing out of. If the series has a destination, and the creator's roughly 8-season map says it does, the question of where those two escalators stop, and whether the brothers recognize the moment they trade places, may be the largest unexploded paradox left in the story. Nothing official tells us. The machinery is simply visible, turning every season, in the corner of every family scene. So let the collection close where the night began, in a lab, with two identical men arguing about which of them is real. We have been everywhere since. Vats and prisons and kitchens, hell and Mars and Taliscria, an empire of 37 and a girl wearing a dead infant's name, and if the tour proved anything, it is that the Maulers' argument was never really theirs. It belongs to everyone in this story. The clone, the rebuild, the resurrected, the possessed, the renamed, the redeemed. Every major figure in this series is standing in some version of that lab, pointing at some version of themselves, asking the question that has no instrument. Which of us is real? And the show's answer, assembled across 4 seasons and never once stated, is that the question is a luxury, and the people worth following are the ones too busy to ask it, the ones making breakfast, holding lines, raising other people's children, getting up off floors they should have died on. Real is not a verdict in this universe. It is a habit. The ones who keep the habit, the show keeps. The ones who stop, it files in drawers, in tanks, in basements, in hell, and the camera, gentle and merciless, moves on to the next kitchen. Let it move then, slowly, while the night settles, because there are 2 travelers we owe a last look before the board goes dark, and they are, fittingly, the show's gentlest impossibility. Alan and Telia, the engineered champion and the decorated general, the coalition's odd couple, a romance the series conducts in cafeteria scenes and worried glances across war rooms. Telia's canon is 1 line long and razor-edged, a general with a zero-tolerance policy for Viltrumite aggression, a soldier whose entire career is the hard line. And the being she loves is Alan, the living weapon who keeps failing upward into mercy, the man who shared a cell with the Empire's worst executioner and walked out calling him a friend. The new head of the coalition, who now privately holds a genocide in a vial and a dead mentor's instruction to use it. Somewhere in the seasons ahead, her hardline and his soft heart are going to meet over that vial, and the show has already taught us everything we need to know about how it stages such meetings. Not in war rooms, in kitchens, over food, between 2 people who chose each other across every category the universe built to keep them sorted. That is the figure one final time, and by now you can draw it yourself. The Empire sorted Nolan into a weapon, and a human kitchen unsorted him. The program sorted Eve into an asset, and a stolen crib unsorted her. The tank sorted the Maulers into original and copy, and they died with the paperwork still disputed. The lab sorted Alan, the curse sorted Amanda, the vat sorted Rudy, the file sorted Donald, and every single one of them has spent the run of this series quietly walking out of their category, one chosen morning at a time, while the institutions that did the sorting, the Empire, the Agency, the Coalition, the tomb of every rigid thing, crack under the administrative burden of people refusing to stay filed. Maybe that is what a paradox actually is, in this show's grammar. Not a logical error, a door. Every contradiction tonight, the clone who is both, the immortal who wants death, the empire that is almost nobody, the pacifist holding the plague, the invincible boy in the hospital bed. Every one of them is a place where the universe's filing system failed, and through every such failure, the show has walked something human. The series is not collecting paradoxes, it is collecting escapes, and somewhere past the edge of the last episode, the machine is still turning. 37 ghosts are folding laundry on a planet that does not know it is occupied. A vial is waiting in a desk on Telescria. 2 brothers are riding their escalators toward each other in the dark. The show has promised us years more of this, and the years will come, and the filing system will fail again, beautifully, on schedule, and something will walk through. It always does. That is the only prophecy this series has ever kept perfectly. So step back, one last time, and look at the whole board the way you would look at a city from a plane at night. Two blue men in a lab, arguing about which of them is real. A genius euthanizing his own original. A government man stacked with his own deaths like a deck of cards. A deathless king begging for an ending, married to a woman who is her own crowd. An empire of 37 ghosts ruling a galaxy on reputation. A weapon that keeps choosing gentleness. A child who skipped the years where doubt is learned. A girl living a dead infant's name with a god chained inside her. A Martian who performed decency until it became true. An agency that bargained itself into being its own threat. And at the center of all of it, a kitchen, a mother, a father with two incompatible truths, and a boy whose name is a wish the universe keeps declining and he keeps making anyway. They are all the same paradox. In the end, every one of them is some version of the question the show has been asking since a bloodied man stood over his son and could not finish the sentence his empire wrote for him. Whether what we are is installed or chosen. Whether the original matters more than the practice. Whether love is a weakness in the armor or the only part that was ever armor at all. The show has never answered it, and I have come to believe it never will, because the answer is not the product. The asking is. A story this violent has no business being this tender, and a story this tender has no business working this well. And that contradiction, the show's own founding paradox, is the reason millions of people keep coming back to a cartoon that hurts them. If you are still awake, let the question be the thing you carry over the edge. Not the blood, not the empires, just the kitchen and the people in it, deciding every morning to be who they decided to be the morning before. That is the only resolution the show believes in. It is probably the only one any of us get. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.